Okay, I think we're live. Hello and welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel and to our live stream holiday special Q&A, uh, where I will be answering all your questions about history and social sciences for the next 2 hours, celebrating the spirit of Christmas with all of you. And in the giving season, I've decided to give you not 1 but 2 hours of Q&A with me. I had everyone vote here on YouTube, and the majority of you wanted me to do a Q&A instead of a live stream lecture, but you can check out my video. The topic was going to be a live stream lecture on the history of Christmas and how Christmas came to be the holiday that it is today and its development over the centuries in different cultural contexts and different religions. But you can check that video out here on the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel, where we do long-form content every Monday and Fridays at 8 p.m. Eastern, short-form content every day, and live streams, usually every Friday and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern, where we answer all your questions, and a Sunday 4 p.m. Live stream lecture. But today, because it is Christmas, or right before Christmas, I should say, we are doing a very, very special Q&A, and instead of 1 hour like I had promised, we're going to do 2 hours in the season of holiday giving, and we're hoping that you will feel the rush of a holiday spirit of giving and charity, and like and subscribe. And if you want to donate to the channel, you can certainly do that as well. And in that giving spirit, it will really help the channel. Anything that you give, again, will help the channel become a better version of itself in the new year as it works on its New Year resolutions. And my big New Year resolution for 2026, I've kind of already determined. I want to make this channel the biggest possible thing that I can. I want to hit the ceiling. I want this to be the only way, the only thing that I am focused on, the only way that I make money. And I can't do that without all of you. So if you'd like to become a member and get exclusive content, bonus content, and early access, feel free to do that. A super chat always helps the channel as well, but totally up to you, as I find a very particular background. And there we have it. This is a Eastern kind of icon, literally, of the nativity scene. So a very wonderful Christmas to all of you. Please like and subscribe and become a friendly neighborhood historian. It's as easy as that. So a very happy holiday season to all of you. Hanukkah is over. Christmas is about to begin. Christmas doesn't just last one day, but for many people it lasts 12 days. That's why you have the song, The 12 Days of Christmas, with many people celebrating from Christmas Eve all the way till the supposed arrival at Epiphany of the three wise men to visit Jesus. And of course, also other Christian communities that relied on the Julian calendar were 2 weeks behind in many of their dating, or 2 weeks, or Western Christians were 2 weeks early, and so therefore Orthodox Christmas for the Eastern Orthodox Christian sects doesn't fall until January the 5th, the day before the last day of Christmas. So the Christmas season is upon us in many, many ways for many, many people. Not something that we think about a lot. Of course, Western secularized society and culture looks at Christmas as a season that it starts sooner and sooner, and it lasts all throughout November now. It used to be right after Thanksgiving was the appropriate time for Christmas to really begin and get going. But in recent years, people are listening to Christmas music, radio stations are playing, and people are turning on the Mariah Carey, and other people are shoving their fingers into their ears early in November, soon after Halloween, as the most popular holiday of the year gains more and more attention and more popularity. And welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel, where in the season of giving and holiday cheer, I'm giving you 2 hours, not 1, but 2 hours of Q&A, where you can ask me, a historian, History Hefner, in my smoking jacket, which was a Christmas gift from last year. So I am in the holiday season, in holiday spirit with what I wear. I've got a Christmas sweater on underneath. You can ask me anything you'd like about history and social sciences, and I'd be happy to answer. Please like and subscribe. It's as easy as that to become a friendly neighborhood historian. A very happy, what day of the week is it to you? It's a very happy Tuesday to all of you, and Merry Christmas Eve. And Christmas Eve is just around the corner, and then of course Christmas. So, and yes, like, subscribe, share, all of that great stuff will be really, really important for all of you. But yes, and if you have any questions about Christmas, the holiday season, or any other historical, social, social science questions, please drop them in the chat. I'd be happy to talk about the history of Christmas. My moderators, maybe Hars, can put the link to my Christmas video where you can learn about the history of Christmas here from the channel, rather than listening to a live stream lecture. I had you guys vote here on YouTube, and you voted choosing that you would rather learn about you would rather get your questions answered than learn about the history of Christmas in a live stream lecture, but you can do both. You can get your questions answered now, then flip over and watch the video when the Q&A is done. So Good evening, Joe. Great to see you. I've got M. Cafo here. I've got Harry and Rodolfo holding down the chat. My great moderators. A very happy holiday season to all of you. Gaiahan is here. Wow, you went to the battlefield of New Orleans, where Andrew Jackson became a legend in American history for defeating a much larger British contingent during the War of 1812. Really fascinating stuff. But yes, a very Merry Christmas to all of you who have practiced that. I hope everybody who was celebrating Hanukkah had a very great Hanukkah season. I know that ended last night. And I believe Kwanzaa starts the day after Christmas. And I haven't done enough studying and research on the history of Kwanzaa, but I probably need to do a video on it because I've got a video on Christmas and Hanukkah. So I might as well answer all of the Yuletide seasonal holidays. So, anyways. Liking and subscribing makes you a friendly neighborhood historian. It's as easy as that. And if you want to be in a giving spirit during the holiday season, we would really appreciate it. All the money that goes into this channel, we use to market the channel, to improve our tech, to improve our equipment and everything that we do here at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel, including our new laptop. We're using the money this month to get a new microphone, a new and updated microphone, a kind of a retrofit that I'm really looking forward to. And if I was Amish, I wouldn't be using a phone to communicate with you, JMG, so think next time before you type. Yes. You can be anything you want to be. Just be a friendly neighborhood historian. I've never met anyone who celebrates Kwanzaa. It's kind of just a LARPy holiday, no offense. True, a lot of people don't celebrate Kwanzaa. Really kind of invented as kind of a separatist African holiday celebrated, where African Americans are able to call back to mind their roots, their ancient ancestral roots in Africa, but isn't actually a holiday celebrated in Africa. So yeah. Alan Jackson's death was a horrible tragedy. I loved his gospel album. Did Alan Jackson die? The country singer? Why does America celebrate the Battle of Lake Erie and the Battle of New Orleans, even though they were both completely pointless because the peace treaty had already been signed? Because we won, and you lost. So, yeah. It doesn't matter. You've got 2 weeks of course, back then you didn't have text messages, you didn't have the internet, you didn't have FaceTime, you didn't have the ability to get information right away. So Harry is referring to the War of 1812, where the Americans, who had already been defeated, had sued for peace, settled the peace negotiation at the Treaty of Ghent right before Christmas in 1814, and then a couple weeks later, Andrew Jackson wins a huge battle at New Orleans against the British forces, and Lake Erie was another naval victory for the Americans against the British Navy. That's pretty impressive, but both of them didn't really necessarily count because they were after the play was rung dead. However, a lot of Americans didn't know that because none of the news had shown up yet. So the Americans took what victories they had, and the British had fought in those battles too. So there are things that kind of allow the Americans to have Pyrrhic moral victories in a war that they otherwise were cudgeled in. When was the last time... I don't know. With you? Never. Bless our holy Theotokos, and may she pray over our lives. What are you referring to, Jorge? Mm-hmm. My background is a Christmas holiday, kind of an Eastern European, Greek Orthodox Christmas iconography of course, the nativity scene with Jesus and Mary and Joseph and the animals in the stable. So, yes. What would you like to know about Napoleon? I talk about Napoleon a lot on this channel. I have a full-length video about Napoleon. He's one of my favorite historical figures. Hello, Faraz. Good to see you. Do you like Bishop Fulton's Sheen? Really impactful for the development of Catholic culture in America. I hate to use the passive, was Bishop Fulton Sheen with his television program in the 1950s and 60s. Became more than just a religious figure, but a cultural figure of the growing TV era. Let me see, Faraz, it's great to see you as always. In the 1800s, in what way did American people government dehumanize Africans? What similarities can we draw to dehumanizing a human fetus's clump of cells? Well, you've got a very politically motivated question, so I want to say I'll give a political analysis for a super chat, like I always do here on the channel. But basically, African Americans, in particular slaves, were dehumanized because they needed a justification for not granting them their freedom. If the Declaration of Independence and the other American founding documents and founding fathers had preached the ideals of freedom of all men and equality of all men, then you couldn't enslave people who were men. You had to dehumanize them. So this process of the racial basis and the racist discrimination against Africans and their descendants in America as slaves intensified. It had already been present before the American Revolution, but intensified after that. So, Israel is a terrorist state. Israel had, yes. Thank you, Samadan. Great to see you again. Going all full caps rage because you have no self-control about Israel when nobody is talking about it at all. Not even me. Yes, let me see here. I was scrolling until I saw a handsome historian. I had to stop by. Well, thank you so much, but History Matters is great too. Since he is on the Orthodox theme, does he remember the UK invading Abyssinia? Trying to remember when that was. Not off the top of my head. Why don't you ask Harry? Was Napoleon Jewish? No. He was actually Italian, Corsican. Not French. Bonaparte. Is Aryan race historical or mythical? It's somewhat historical, but obviously highly exaggerated. And in the wake of what the Nazis did to try to justify their despicable racism, a lot of people don't want to talk about Aryan influences in historical developments in the Asian steppe, as well as between Eastern Europe, the Caucasus, the Transcaucasus area, and all the way to India and Afghanistan. Let me see here. Let me see. This is the first Catholic channel I've come across live stream. This is not a Catholic channel. This is a history channel. This isn't even a Catholic icon or depiction. This is not normal iconography or religious art that you would find in Roman Catholicism. Roman Catholicism's Madonna and Child would be far more along the lines of this. And even this is kind of two-dimensional. They're very three-dimensional. And, of course, the golden circles around their heads are halos. And this, of course, is celebrating Dia de los Tres Reyes, or the arrival of the three kings to bring gifts to the baby Jesus in what's called Epiphany, or the revealing. So I'm using these backgrounds not to make the channel a religious channel, but just to get into the theme of Christmas and everything. Here's something else. Here's other art you probably would see in the Renaissance in late medieval Europe. So, let me see. So anyways, Iran means land of Aryans. That's true. Let me see. We used to call the Gauls our barbarians. Gauls were one of various Celtic groups that were living in Western Europe that the Romans encountered. Gaul was the land that they conquered that the Romans eventually took over, and this included large sections of basically all of France, and the Low Countries, Belgium, parts of Switzerland, even Germany. The Romans never were able to really cross the Rhine and subdue the different Germanic tribes like the Alemanni or the Teutoni, and many of these groups would eventually migrate into the Roman Empire, the Western Roman Empire, during its decline and pick off territories, including in Gaul. One of these groups was known as the Franks, and the Franks under King Clovis I in 495 converted to Christianity, and this became the basis for the Merovingians and later the Carolingians and the French kingdom that was developed during the Middle Ages that becomes known as France. So there's some quick history for you there. Let me see here. So it was a social construct. You're referring to the race thing I said. Race does exist. There are race is based on biological, phenotypic, and genetic differences in human beings based off of the areas of where they come from. So yes, race certainly does exist, but racism is definitely a social construct, as is any form of bigotry. Although humans do have a propensity to hate and fear the other. That's why xenophobia has been present ever since the ancient Greeks. It's an ancient Greek word. Is Epstein a forbidden topic for this stream? No. Although I don't like to talk about politics a great deal, the Epstein scandal may be one of the biggest in American governmental history. However, if we look at all history of all the world, particularly in the Western world, where transparency, free speech, freedom of press, and liberal democracy has allowed people the notion that their governments will be transparent with them, when governments throughout history were never transparent with their people. The idea that a high-ranking individual in the social or economic world had connections to political, military, and social and entertainment figures and did horrible things with some of them, or they were aware of his activity, should not be so foreign to us. It should not surprise us at all that Jeffrey Epstein was doing what Jeffrey Epstein was doing and had the connections that Jeffrey Epstein had. He was rich, he was influential, and powerful people being rich and perverted isn't necessarily shocking news to us. It's how deep does his governmental and political connections actually go, and how much has it influenced the federal government's apparatus. So, Emir is giving a super chat. Hello, historian, wishing you a Merry Christmas. So Merry Christmas to you too, and welcome to our special Christmas Q&A, where you can get all of your questions about history and social sciences answered. And if you like what I'm talking about so far, please like and subscribe. I appreciate your generosity in the season of giving, and I am giving you 2 hours of my time instead of 1. And instead of giving you a live stream lecture about the top history of Christmas, you can just watch that here on the channel anytime. You also can go check out my playlist where I read to you 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. You can check that out tomorrow. And then as Christmas unfolds, you can listen to me read the Christmas Carol. It's a playlist that I'm very, very proud of, a reading that took me a long time to do, and so please go and watch those. I really, really, really love doing that stuff. So, and I'm trying to catch up to the chat, so let me see here. Harry, can you start just deleting comments that are just copy and pasted rants by angry people who don't know anything? Let me see here. Yeah, then I'm empty. The British tried to invade Abyssinia or Ethiopia in the late 19th century, but Menelik II, Ethiopia's long historical and cultural connections to Europe via the idea of the Christian kingdom in Africa, Prester John, the Ethiopians being longtime Christians, all of that, Coptic Christians, all of that kind of kept Europe made Europe more hesitant to colonize Ethiopia than other parts of Africa, and the brilliance of Menelik and the other Ethiopian leaders, all the way down to Haile Selassie, kept Ethiopia relatively free from the clutches of European colonization, one of the very few African countries that did that in the 19th and 20th centuries. Basically, the Ethiopians were able to swindle the British on several occasions from taking over their country. In America, the process of ending slavery was very rough and problematic. How did the British Empire fare with the ending of slavery? Was it taken well? It was a long process that took decades. Abolitionism started in Great Britain. The UK fought hard for the right to free people, and many people were opposed to the idea of freeing the slaves, but it was far more of an economic question in Britain, where you did have slavery, but you didn't have slavery as ingrained in such a significant region of the country, basically where the entire society of that area of the country was built upon it, like the American South was built on the slavery of the 17th and 18th centuries. But the British, slavery was far less domestic, far more international, far more lucrative, far more an issue for the colonies. So it was a little less directly in the face of the British, although many British people in England certainly owned slaves. So it was a different sort of issue. It had an economic feature. It was more predominantly economic than it was social. But there was a moral and religious outrage over it and debate, as there was in America during the 18th century that the Americans had in the 19th century. Happy holidays, Miracle Boy. Good to see you here. Let me see. Can you talk about the history of the character Santa? So Santa is based on the ancient Christian figure St. Nicholas of Myra, who was a bishop of Myra in the early 4th century. St. Nicholas was supposedly active in the Council of Nicaea's decision to recognize the deity of Jesus. He is also one of the bishops during the time when Constantine had stopped persecution and legalized Christianity, so the Christian church had far more freedom and far more time to develop its ecclesiological structures. Nicholas's legends became quite popular. He was known for his charity. In order to randomly and anonymously show his giving heart, he would drop gifts, including gold and toys, down chimneys to people. He would also supposedly leave gifts if people left their shoes or their socks outside their doors. He would leave gifts and goodies for them. He made toys for children. And of course, these developed into different traditions in different areas of the world. Papa Noel, or of course, Kris Kringle is what the Russians would eventually call him, being a derivative of the Eastern Greek Church. They would eventually have their Russian Orthodox Church. He developed in different areas. Eventually, Thomas Nast in the 19th century, the same guy who gave us the image of the Republican elephant, by the way. Go check out my video on the formation of the two American political parties to learn more. And of course, my video on the history of Christmas. He developed this idea based off of German folk tales about St. Nicholas, which were partially based on St. Nicholas, but also based on Odin, who supposedly rode around the world checking the hearts of men on a sleigh with reindeer pulling him. That amalgamation eventually made it into this idea of a large man in a red suit and hat who carries a sack of toys, and this was modernized by Coca-Cola. This was in the middle of the 19th century. Nast made this for the German immigrants who were coming over to the United States in huge numbers, and in the early 20th century, this was modernized by Coca-Cola in their advertising campaign, where you've got basically Santa Claus, and from there you get the songs, you get the idea of the reindeer, you get Rudolph, you get the elves, and everything else that we know and love about jolly old St. Nicholas. Let me see here. And these paintings are indeed beautiful. I do love the art of medieval Europe. Let me see here. I don't know any other Salinger off the top of my head when you're referring to those battleships. Why did the Romans respect Gauls as fierce warriors but absolutely hated and dehumanized Carthage? Probably because the Gauls kept giving them problems for a long time, and Carthage was seen more as, I think Carthage was more of an existential threat in the fact that they were a more organized empire. You're not dealing with fierce barbarian brigands. You're dealing with a cultured and developed empire that really knows its stuff when it comes to seafaring, mercenaries, and military buildup. And so the irony is that dehumanizing the more civilized society made sense for the Romans because it was easier for them to delegitimize and destroy them because of that. So, the UK government didn't finish paying off debt of compensation slave owners until 2016. Interesting. Should we retake Constantinople? Who wants to retake it? I don't understand why so many people hate Israel. It's some people hate what Israel has done with the war. Some people hate Israel's entire history. Some people hate Jews. A lot of people hate Jews. Most of them hate Jews. Let me see here. Is it true that Romans used to make Germanic mercenaries breed with Romans for taller soldiers? I've heard of that before. They also gave them land in the empire so that they would not attack. As the Roman population declined in the later centuries, the Romans felt that the best way to work with the barbarians was to placate them by giving them land or money and basically hiring them as mercenaries, hoping that they would become more and more Roman. Some of the last great Roman generals, like Stilicho and Flavius Aetius, were half barbarian, so they were not trusted by the Roman Senate, and this led to them being removed and really hurting the Western Empire's chances of surviving in the early 5th century. Merry Christmas to you, Elavu. Great to see you again. Been a long time. Do you think if I tell racist Americans that I'm Iranian and Iranians are Aryan, they will be okay with me being here? I have no idea. Americans don't know what Aryans are. Thanks for the clarification. Do you think Epstein is dead or not? Yes, Epstein is dead, but he didn't kill himself. So anyways, Napoleon was how tall? Probably about 5'5", 5'4", a little on the shorter side, but for that time, people were shorter because of malnutrition. But also, the power of politics and political cartoons were invented by the British at this time, late 18th, early 19th centuries. So there are depictions of their king as a kindly farmer George character when he lived in a giant palace, helped bolster the popularity of the monarchy under George III, the same king, by the way, from the American Revolution. But their depictions of Napoleon as a short little brat created so many different stereotypes about Napoleon complex and psychology and the development of just this little guy who wants to rule the world. It's not really true. Napoleon wasn't compensating for anything. He knew what he was doing. Let me see here. Let me see here. It must be hell for the lower middle class. Sure. Now that you talked about Epstein, did you think the youngest victims of Epstein was older than Prophet Muhammad's youngest victim? Oh, geez. Probably about the same age. And thank you, Samuel. I appreciate you being here. Merry Christmas to you as well. This is our Christmas holiday special. I will not live stream until after Christmas. The day after, I will be doing my usual Q&A on Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern. But we're going for 2 hours today from 6 to 8. And you've just joined us just in time. So you're getting all your questions of history and social sciences answered, as I'm in the holiday spirit and in the season of giving here in my friendly neighborhood studio. Was Ebenezer a common name at the time, or did Dickens just make it up? Ebenezer is a biblical name. I don't know. I don't know many Ebenezers, but it's not uncommon for people in the 19th and 18th centuries to have more elusive biblical names. You know, Joseph, Jacob, James, John, Jim. Jim is a derivative of James. You know, obviously Luke, Mark. These are biblical names. But Ebenezer is a biblical name, so is Abner, for instance. But those are not names that you hear all the time, yet Abner Doubleday was an American Civil War general who supposedly invented baseball. He didn't, but I have a video on that too. It wasn't horribly common. Let me see here. Thoughts on why Hitler failed to take USSR. Overstretched his military resources, underestimated the Russians' ability to dig themselves in both Leningrad and Stalingrad. Probably should have just gone for Moscow or one or the other. I think almost all but this is one thing I will say about that. A lot of people give Hitler and Napoleon a hard time for invading Russia because in retrospect it looked like a stupid idea. Napoleon actually successfully did conquer Russia, and then the guerrilla warfare kicked him out when he was in retreat because the Russians burned their capital. And that's what makes Alexander I go from just an ordinary czar to being a legend amongst the Russian emperors and rulers, and an inspiration for generations to come, giving Russia the moniker of something that's being very hard to conquer. Now, you could give Hitler a hard time and say Napoleon failed, so how are you supposed to win? But Hitler was used to winning at this point, and the Blitzkrieg and the Wehrmacht were extraordinarily successful at first, and the Soviets almost totally collapsed. It makes total sense for the National Socialists to turn on the Communists, because that was something that was quite a huge staple of Nazi ideology, and many communists were killed and tormented and persecuted and tortured during the Holocaust. I think almost all ideologies are like medicine. If used moderately, they help, but extremely, they damage. Like how socialism moderately helps, but communism damages, but Islam is an exception. There are many moderate Muslims who would disagree, and have every reason to. The vote in Congress won by one vote. The new congresswoman from Arizona who wasn't seated when there is... Oh, for goodness sake. Let me see. Islam is likely a poison. If you take it moderately, it moderately poisons, but if you take it extremely, well, I think that's your own bias on that issue. But check out my video on the history of Islam for more details there. I was on a Islam spur during what, April and May, and I got a lot of, or May and June, and I got a lot of flack for it. People just saying the most horrible things about me and to me, just simply because I challenged Islamic historical narratives. I've challenged Christian historical narratives, and Christians don't say that to me. Jews don't do that. Buddhists don't do that. Islam is in a sensitive position because of radical extremism, making where Muslims feel they have a religion to defend that is beautiful, and they feel the need to do that because of how malign their religion is, particularly in the West, and the way the radicals don't give them a good name at all. Let me see. What dynasty followed the Han? The Han, I think you get the Three Kingdoms period. You get these interregnums in Chinese history, but eventually, it was the Sui. The Sui dynasty was a short, rich, powerful dynasty that kind of laid the groundwork for the return to Confucian principles, which stabilized the civil bureaucracy and allowed the Tang dynasty to rule for almost 3 centuries. Saint Nick also punched a heretic for blasphemy. Yes, Arius and the idea of the deity of Christ. What if guns were invented in Africa? How different would history have been? It's a fascinating idea. It's a big what if. Gunpowder is Chinese, but if guns had been marketed in Africa and perfected in Africa the way the Europeans had done it, I think technological development is what allowed the West, and by the West I mean Europe and America and the Americas, to be extraordinarily overpowered when it comes to relating to other countries, which usually led to colonization, subjugation, and oppression. I think Africa would have probably had I think you would have had some really powerful kingdoms in Africa that would have been able to colonize large areas of the Middle East and maybe even Europe. And they did try at several times to do that. It's funny that neither Nicholas nor Arius were present at the Council of Just Christians or framing. It's funny that I don't care. They had them as long as Europeans did. No, the Europeans brought the gun to the Native American and to the African. What is the name of the painting? I don't know the name of the painting, but it's a typical nativity painting. You have Joseph, Mary, and Jesus. I like how you don't see Joseph's face. He's kind of hiding there, and these are the angels supposedly worshiping him. And it's in the middle of the day when we always think of Christmas at night. We think of Christmas as starting at midnight on Christmas Eve when Mary gives birth to Jesus. So I love the twist on it. Good evening, Roman. Good to see you. Israel only wants a state for themselves, not the Palestinians. And the Palestinian, and see, I don't want to get down into this rabbit hole because people are just blowing up the chat with nonsense, but the Palestinians do not want a state for the Israelis. Let's be clear here. Everyone in the West wants to point out to you very quickly that the Jews and the Israelis don't want the Palestinians to have a state, which isn't true. A lot of them do. Some of them don't, but a lot of them do. But you won't find many Palestinians who are okay with the Jews having a state. In fact, the whole point of Hamas, the Palestinian Authority, and many of these organizations is that the Israelis don't have a state, that they are utterly destroyed, and many people are either tacitly or openly supportive of that in both the West Bank and Gaza. And by the way, Israel did itself no favors during the war because now you have a lot of people who have seen Israel destroy your entire infrastructure. You wouldn't want them to survive either, I think, at that point. Let me see. Was he not a tiny man with a superiority complex? Is definitely how I remember learning about him. Nope. That's a psychological reinterpretation of Napoleon based off of British propaganda. What are we talking about? History and social sciences. Anything you want to ask? Be sure to do it. Is somebody blaming Israel for 9/11? I mean, I just don't even know what to say at that point. It wasn't Jews in Tel Aviv who were cheering when the towers came down. It was Palestinians in Gaza and in the West Bank who were cheering when the towers came down. Do the math. It's not that simple. Radical Islam is still bad. You can be mad at what Israel has done in Gaza and still think that radical Islam is bad. Gee, what a concept. Nuance. Explain Napoleon's relationship with his wife. An up and down thing. He kind of stole her away from her husband. I think her husband dies, but that was well after she had been unfaithful to him. They didn't really get along. Napoleon loved her. I'm trying to think about how many children they had. It wasn't the first marriage, I think, for either of them. It's Ridley Scott kind of takes over with a movie and kind of exaggerates it. But Napoleon felt a certain connection to Josephine, who was older than him, which was uncommon at the time, who died before he did, and I think his love life haunted him almost as much as his military defeats. Don't know a huge amount more about their personal lives. beyond that, but the relationship was not they were desperately in love, but they were also difficult people with each other. Hello, Mohammed. Great to have you here. Let me see here. Merry Christmas to Bill. Indeed. Did you know that St. Thomas More penned a fiery rebuttal against Martin Luther, verbatim called him, wow, and other scatological insults? Sounds like something they would do back then. She was tall, he was short, not compatible. Napoleon wasn't short, Josephine wasn't that tall. Was Christmas built on the ruins of the Roman holiday to Mithras? Mithras his birthday was celebrated on December 25th. Horus had a virgin birth. The Sol Invictus holiday that celebrated the god of the sun in the dead of winter, which was kind of a rebuttal to the winter solstice itself, was an ancient Roman festival. There were celebrations to Saturnalia on December the 25th, but the Romans and Christianity's answer to this was to say that no, Christ was born on December 25th. And as they began to take more and more power in the Roman Empire, they began to get the dominant narrative of it. And of course, that is where we get all of these different ideas of Christmas being about Christ. However, to be fair, Christian writers in the early days of the church did think that Jesus could be born on December 25th. Yeah. Is it true that many people in Stalingrad became cannibals? Yes, cannibalism was quite common on the winter front in the frozen tundra of the Barbarossa. And no, Napoleon got Moscow. Wasn't even the capital. He achieved effectively nothing with his invasion and had 500,000 of his troops killed with no material benefit to his empire. That is wrong. That is absolutely wrong. St. Petersburg was indeed the Russian capital at the time. Napoleon wasn't interested in seizing the Russian capital. He was interested in plummeting the Russian culture. If you understood Russian culture, you would know that Napoleon wanted Moscow because he wanted to strip the Russians of their military might. He did that at Borodino, and then he believed that if he seized Moscow, he would seize the cultural center and hub of Russia, and he was right about that. That's why the Russians set fire to their capital. It was a daring move by Napoleon not to go for St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg on the river is much harder, by the way. It's just closer to Europe. But Napoleon was supremely confident in his Grande Armée, and they actually delivered. And then, of course, he was driven out after that. Could you please rank the top 10 kings, military geniuses from the likes of Alexander the Great, Hitler? Ooh. I don't know if Hitler's that great of a military genius. He had some brushes with military genius, but also made some horrible blunders, like thinking the Allies were going to attack at Calais instead of Normandy on D-Day. I should do that. That's a great idea. That's going to be a long video. I should do that as a tier ranking video or a top 10 video that I could do either as a short or a long form video, Caesar. So thank you for that idea. What do you do for a living? Well, this is part of what I do for a living. I like to keep my private life as private as I can. If he had went the continental system isn't working, we're on good terms with Russia and just sort of came to peace, then he would have been unstoppable. No. Napoleon wanted to punish Russia because he was worried that if one domino fell out of the continental system, then a bunch of dominoes would start trading with Britain again, and he wasn't up for that. Thank you for joining us from Northern Ireland. Have you done any videos on fictional characters or legends that were based on real people or true events? Yeah, I've talked about Greek mythology, Hindu mythology. I've done plenty of videos where I take the mythological aspects and explain their historical relevance and impact. Did China and Rome interact beyond trading through the Silk Road? Not too much. But thank you for bringing up that they did interact. A lot of people think they were the Han Chinese and the Roman Empire were totally ignorant of each other. What if Hannibal took over Italy? Would we all be black? No. Hannibal wasn't necessarily even black in the sense of sub-Saharan black. I don't know if, I think the Romans would not have been, I don't think the Carthaginians would have been able with a smaller population and weaker economy to hold Rome anyways. But the Carthaginians were a Phoenician people. I don't know if that means that the Romans and then therefore everyone the Romans conquered would have dark skin. I don't know if the Carthaginians would have built the huge, massive empire. It would have been interesting if Carthage had been the center of the ancient world instead of Rome, because they would have certainly made Carthage the center if they defeated the Romans in the Second Punic War. Good question, though. Well, first of all, the extremist Muslims are the ones who follow the real Islam, and the moderate ones are the ones who twist the religion. I don't even want to get involved in this. What about China's first emperor? They can't go near the tomb. Bad luck, I think. So Qin Shi Huang, the emperor of the Qin dynasty, where China gets its name from, by the way, builds this incredible, wants to be remembered for a tomb that would be undiscoverable, where he would be protected in the next life forever and ever. He at first proposes the idea of having a bunch of his men buried with him in their armor, and the compromise is made where terracotta and clay is used to build and construct his tomb. It is discovered in the mid-1970s. But no, you are supposedly, even though they are a communist government without all of the superstitions and cultural attachments, at least ostensibly, the Chinese government has said that it is sacred ground for them and they don't want to go near it. Let me see here. China's first emperor. We can all celebrate the birth of Jesus on Xmas, knowing he was born in spring. Christ is king. I don't know when Jesus was born. Are you Jewish? No. People ask that. I take it as a compliment. You put me in the same category as people like Jesus and Einstein, I'm going to think that's a compliment, but no, I'm not Jewish. Why does God allow for chattel slavery in the Old Testament? Leviticus 25. This isn't a religious channel. My job is not to defend various religious perspectives, practices, beliefs, or anything like that. Slavery was common in all ancient civilizations. The Hebrews themselves have been slaves. What the Hebrew Bible does is regulate slavery in a way that it hadn't been regulated before. I'm serious. That's all that it is. And slavery was extraordinarily common in ancient Israel. Let me see. Thoughts on Joseph Mengele, the angel of death. It's shocking to me that he was not hunted down and killed, but he was able to flee to South America after the angel of death of Auschwitz, as he was known. He's certainly not an angel, other than a fallen one. Was forced to escape. Mary, Queen of Scots. What do you want to know about her? Braveheart. You're talking about Scottish history, fascinating stuff, but I don't know what you want to know in particular. Let me see. How about radical capitalism? That's bad for the people that don't have it, I guess. Napoleon was about 5'8". I think that's a little too tall. Trump is using Napoleon tactics on South America. Sounds about right. I met a Gazan who told me that Gaza has a huge atheist population. He also said that 85% of Gaza want a two-state solution. Not that I care, but that's what I heard. Some people think that. I mean, that doesn't change the fact that people are not always responsible for the governments that are in charge of them, but do often bear some of the brunt there. Thank you for subscribing, Bill. Let me see here. I'm sorry about that. Do you know anything about Shinto and Japanese spirituality? Shinto is one of the most ancient religions in the world. It emphasizes the worship of spirits. It's sort of similar to animism. Ancestor worship is part of it. But it's looking at things through a pantheistic lens where spirituality is present in all creatures and everything around us has spirits. And the Japanese believed that their emperor had a spirit. They believed he had a kami and that he was a god. It definitely is the most predominant belief in Japan religiously until Zen Buddhism, but it also continues to impact Japan for centuries. The idea of the emperor's superiority because he is a deity doesn't seem antagonistic towards Buddhism and continues to inspire Japanese patriotism until the last World War, World War III. So, Moscow wasn't the capital of Russian Empire in 1812. They had moved the Russian court to St. Petersburg when they thought he was about to invade. What material benefit did Napoleon get from the invasion of Russia? The city was burned, so he got nothing from that. He didn't think the city was going to get burned. He was trying, and it didn't. I don't think he cared about the material benefit. You don't understand Napoleon if you think he was into riches and spoils. Napoleon had a strategic in-gaming goal: desecrate the Russians. He didn't care about St. Petersburg. He didn't want to take St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg was the capital even before that. The Russian Empire. It's not Muscovy anymore. It's the Russian Empire by this point. Napoleon wanted to take the heart out of the Russian people and send a clear message to the British that they couldn't ally with anyone, and to everyone else in Europe that if you ally with the British and break the continental system, there will be consequences. Napoleon wanted to basically destroy the power of Russia and the Tsardom, and he's dealing with the largest nation on earth, so he went straight for the throat. I think it's a brilliant idea. I just think that the Russians pulled a fast one on him. Being willing to burn your own capital so Napoleon can't have it is gutsy. The fact that they did that shows the patriotism of the Russian people, the same patriotism they would use 130 years later to kick the Jerrys out of their country. So, if you could compare religions, which is based most on truth? I don't want to compare religions. This isn't a religious channel. I look at religion as a historical phenomenon in the fact that all societies feel the desire to develop religious beliefs of one form or another. And people of all religions or no religions are welcome here on the channel to learn about history and social sciences, Caesar. If you want to do a super chat, I can give you a deeper analysis about that, but then I feel like I'm almost spouting AI stuff. What do you think about various sources claiming that in the past human lifespans were hundreds of years longer? Common in ancient traditions. The Bible has it. The Mesopotamians talked about it. It's this idea of long life symbolizing greatness. Let me see. The plunder that they earned was effectively all abandoned during the disastrous retreat. I just don't understand where any of the benefits is, considering that over 500,000 troops would die out of a 600,000 man army. Yes, Napoleon knew that was going to happen when he attacked Moscow. I just don't understand why you don't see how people losing wars don't get what they want. He did have a great memory. Thanks, Brooks. If Islam won the first crusade, would we all be Islam? If Nazi, what would we all be Nazis? No. I don't like we would all be speaking German. It might be partially true, but I don't think it's fully true. And thank you for the gift membership. That always helps. And welcome to Friendly Historians. Desmond, you now have that emoji, but you also have early access to videos and shorts, and you have bonus perks that only members can get. Ukrainian women allowed to leave at war outbreak. Men went. Result serious war support and nursing shortage. Have you heard that? What have you heard? Not a huge amount if you're referring to the current war. Radical Catholics be like, I love my neighbor and Jesus. Okay. Did we get Radical Catholics also crusades? Also destroy synagogues, also Byzantines, also Latin Empire. I mean, I don't think the Crusades were completely unjustified, and I don't think that they were the violent, overblown destruction that everybody wants us to think they were. But the Crusades were quite nasty at many, many points. Did we get marshals from the person in British history named William Marshall, the creator of chivalry? I think so. Let me see. What are the origins of the Palestinian people? Did they arrive in present-day Israel during the Arab invaders, or were they ancient Bedouins who later converted to Islam? A combination of both. Let me see. Trust in the sinless blood of Jesus Christ against their sin nature and against the invisible demons and the invisible air. Well, that's very Christmas-themed. For sure, help the Antichrist split spirit destroy the Romanov family, bringing in the fall of Christ, rise of communism? Huh? Are you okay? What about the Taino Indians' God? Don't know a lot about it. We do have a Discord. We're not using it, but I am going to be doing that and a lot of other stuff that'll be fun this holiday season. Thank you for your mistletoe. Did you know that Austrian painter praised Islam, was pro-Palestine? What does that say about Islam? Yes, I did know that, and I have brought that up on several occasions. The Grand Mufti, and if you don't believe me, the Grand Mufti, the religious leader of the Palestinian people, was working to coordinate with Hitler a way to bring if a war was successful, to bring Jews to the Nazis so that they could kill them. Which begs the question that Hitler wasn't going to stop in Europe. It wasn't about European Jews. It never was about European Jews. And yes, Hitler had no affinity for any religion. At the end of the day, I see him as a whiny skeptic. But he definitely respected anything that was violent, and he saw Islam as violent. Yeah, Harry, he wasn't going to give up the continental system because beating Britain was the French dream. I don't think Napoleon went ballistic. I think Napoleon did everything right. He just ran out of gas. Do you have it as a historian like classic fictional literature like Jane Eyre and Great Expectations? Yes, I love classic literature. Have you ever seen the YouTube channel Apostate Prophet? No, but I should. Isn't the birth of Israel just another form of Western colonialism? I would say yes, if you were to say that the people who settled in that land were French or German or Americans, that they weren't. The Israelis, the Jews, were the ancient people of the land. Colonization, imperialism, had deprived them of that land, and many of them returned, their descendants returned to that land. Now, it's not a one-for-one thing. That doesn't mean that the Palestinians have no right to live in the land. I'm not going to make a geopolitical pronouncement. But no, I don't see it as a form of Western colonialism. The West allowed it to happen in the wake of the Holocaust, and the clear signs that anti-Semitism was such a problem in the West that the Jews needed to be elsewhere and would flourish better in other places. The Americans obviously supported Israel. They had a large Jewish population. But no, I certainly don't. Was the Chinese Empire ever Christian before Mao? No. There were Christian influences and missionaries in the late Qing Empire, but China was overwhelmingly still Buddhist, and many Chinese were repelled by Christian converts in their country, seeing it as a form of Western colonialism, which influenced things like the Boxer Rebellion of the late 19th century. I'm answering questions. There's a lot of people asking a lot of questions, Bill. I've got to give the answers I've given, and I think I've expanded plenty. In theory, could we set up a Discord as a mod and member-only thing like a trial run and then expand it to everybody? Sure. Evil is subjective. Nationalism warrants advocating historical good, bad, and the ugly. If it wasn't, Americans or any other country's residents wouldn't be able to be proud of their history. No, that's not true. But the continental system was a total disaster from the start to finish that didn't work in any significant way. The continental system didn't work. The invasion of Russia was a complete mistake. The invasion of Spain was a total disaster. All three of those things are untrue. The invasion of Russia worked until the Russian guerrilla warfare and the burning of the capital turned the tide. He put his brother on the throne of Spain, and that actually seemed to work. Spanish rebels were eventually able to thwart him, and the continental system probably would have worked if Alexander I had not defected. So, and you just think that because you're a Brit. Anyways, God punished the Israelis by not having any land to own. Where's God in all of that? V2 rockets and capture proximity, fuse tech and fissile material and dispersal tech. Why didn't the Nazis throw dirty missiles at London? I don't think they had them available at that time. Let me see. You need braces. I do have retainers and things like that, and if you want to continue to help me make my retainer payments so that my teeth can continue to get fixed, because they used to be a lot worse than this boomerang, please give a super chat, and that'll be enough money for me to make my payment this month so that they don't take my retainers away from me along with my easy chair. Western imperialism equals Pope. I don't know what that means. I know Persian history is a little bit outside of your specialty, but any period in Persian history that you've find more interesting? No, I love Persian history. I've loved learning about Persia. I love talking about Persia and its history. Go watch my video on the Safavids, and that's my era. That's how Persia becomes the predominant force of Shia Islam in history, is the 12 Shia Islam of Ismail and his descendants taking over Iran or Persia in 1501. How do you think World War II would have gone if Germany had supported and propped nationalism, nationalist China, and never supported Japan? And thank you for the gift, Emir. I so appreciate you. You're so kind and so giving, and it's perfect holiday timing for all of that. It's World War III, by the way. There's 3 world wars, but ZR had supported and propped nationalist China, never supported Japan. I don't see them doing that. If they had, I think Japan... I don't know. It's hard to think about because the British were helping the Chinese at so many different points and so many other things were going on there. It's hard to think of them doing that. If they had helped that, then Mao would have probably been killed. The Gomchangdan, the communist Chinese, would have been completely obliterated. And the Japanese probably would have been stopped in their tracks. So would it have been necessarily worse for the Chinese, considering how many millions of people were killed by Mao, if the Nazis had helped the nationalist Chinese, the Kuomintang, and Jin Jiaxi, or as we know him, Chiang Kai-shek? Possibly. But if they had fought with Japan, then I don't know that the United States gets involved in the war, and I don't know if Britain holds on. Because Britain couldn't have beaten the Germans without the help of the United States, and everybody knows that. You know it. As Tucker Carlson would say, you know it, I know it, everybody knows it, and anyone who doesn't is lying to you. So yes. Yes, they had a guerrilla. It's called the Peninsular War. But the Portuguese royal family wouldn't have had to flee to Brazil if they weren't in danger of losing their lives. Most of the country was lawless under the command of the guerrillas, which was no better than organized criminals. I mean, Napoleon could have effectively gotten whatever he wanted out of the Bourbon monarchy. He didn't want the Bourbon. He wanted Europe. What he did get out of putting his brother on the throne and causing a total uprising, he wanted the Bonapartes to control Europe. That's why Louis went to the Netherlands and Joseph went to Spain. I mean, why is this so hard for you to understand? I know you're a Brit, and the Brits have to be on top, and so Napoleon has to look bad, but everything Napoleon does actually makes a lot of sense. Perhaps the only thing that I think he does that's probably pretty stupid is invading Egypt. He does it to to try to get to British India, but I don't think he ever had a chance of actually getting there. I think that the Egyptian war with the Ottomans was a bad mistake, and then the Brits show up and make it worse for him, and Napoleon should have known he could have never handled the British Navy. In what way did the continental system work? Everyone continued trading with Britain, all but name via smuggling. They tried to do it. Napoleon wasn't happy with it. And when the Russians did it overtly, he tried to put the kibosh on them. And he got very close to doing so. What you're failing to understand is how successful Napoleon was and how close to ultimate success Napoleon got. That should be an important lesson to everybody. Did England and Scotland united become Britain, or did England take over Scotland and just change the name? The latter. Again, what was the benefit in any way to losing 500,000 men in Russia for nothing in return? That's not what he expected to happen. He didn't expect to lose 500,000 fighting men. How do you not understand that? That when you go in with a force of 500,000 men, you don't expect 500,000 of them to die. It's the Grande Armée for a reason. It's to intimidate and destroy. And he met his match at Borodino, and he still beat the Russians there. And I'm a Russian historian. I love Russia, but Napoleon, he's jacked. When it comes to historical history, when it comes to fighting wars, he's on the top. But Joseph wasn't like Louis. Louis operated in a way that's made him accepted. I don't care. It's not about that. It's about what Napoleon wanted to do. Ended up removing Louis and annexing the Netherlands. So, what do you want to know about William the Conqueror? Britain comes from Brittany and Normandy. The nomenclature is the same. Britain is the name of the ancient name that the Romans gave to the island Britannia. It was originally conquered as only the southern part of the country or the island. And they called that Roman Britain. They call the northern part, known as Caledonia, would eventually become Scotland, and the major island to the west, Hibernia, would become known as Ireland. The UK, of course, includes the Isle of Man, the Isle of Wight, and, of course, Northern Ireland. William the Conqueror changed everything by connecting England permanently to the rest of the continent when the Duke of Normandy managed to conquer all of England. Then, of course, later on, you have the Plantagenets, the rise of the Angevin Empire, and the fact that, which I have a video on as well, and the fact that England basically called the shots in France and England and the British Isles for a very, very long time, until their loss of 100 Years' War pushed them out of France basically completely, and they were forced to turn elsewhere, which is why they developed a navy to defend their island, which is why they were able to defeat Napoleon, because all history is connected. Yes, I just went from Julius Caesar to Napoleon. You're welcome. You wanted me to go more in depth? I went more in depth. And thank you, Amir, again for the gift. I really appreciate you, and a Merry Christmas to you and all of yours. Yes. My point is that it was a total misstep. No, it wasn't a total misstep. Not when you're winning. Not when everything's turning up aces. Not when you can do what he did at Austerlitz. It's not a total misstep. It's not. I mean, is it a misstep in the fact that it didn't go well? I guess. But was it a bad decision at the time? No. Retrospection allows us to say, yeah, Napoleon shouldn't have done that. But that's easy for us to say. Napoleon had no idea it wasn't going to work, and it looked like it was going to work, right up until Moscow was on flames. In the U.S., black men with syphilis were deliberately left untreated in the Tuskegee experiment so doctors could observe them die. Yes, horrible. To observe the effects of a social disease on a population that was considered to be inferior, so you could do that whenever you wanted. It's one of the worst travesties, one of the worst. It's disgusting. It's tantamount and similar to what the Nazis did in their camps, in experiments, and what the Japanese did to the Chinese during Unit 731. I have a video right now about the Japanese war crimes that nobody in the West talks about. Fantastic questions, chatters. You are half of the enjoyment of the channel. Yes, they are great. Yes, I got great chatters who have great questions and great points to bring up. Hideki Tojo should be considered one of the greatest men that ever lived. Revive Japanese greatness, I'll leave it at that. Hideki Tojo was executed by hanging by the Japanese government because of the war crimes he committed. He is the man who is responsible for Nanjing and Unit 731, and his stubbornness led to Nagasaki and Hiroshima. If the Japanese had surrendered any point of that war, no Hiroshima, no Nagasaki. The Americans weren't just going to blow up those cities out of nowhere. His personal ambitions got in the way of him controlling Europe. Yes, maybe a little bit, but his personal ambitions were to control Europe. So he already was doing his personal ambitions. DNA studies say that Palestinians have a direct link to ancient Canaanites. Some of them do, some of them don't. The vast majority of them are Arabs. Let me see here. If he hadn't, let me see. And you've also got the fact that you have a mix of Semitic peoples who live in that entire region. The Jews are not the only Semites in the world, so there's that too. There's amalgamations and combinations of these different people. Palestinians and Jews share a lot of DNA, for instance. If the U.S. didn't enter World War III, could the Nazis have developed the intercontinental missile along with the atom bomb? Yes, probably on their way to doing it. Great question. Hello, Mr. France, great to see you. I saw a great black and white Russian film. I'd have to know what that is. Why and what, it probably is an Eisenstein. But it's from the 1970s. Eisenstein was dead by then, but Sergei Eisenstein, who made Battleship Potemkin and Ivan the Terrible, is considered one of the greatest directors in all of history, not just Russian film history. Why in woke ideology, people from India are considered victims of British imperialism, but not people of Ireland? It's the skin color. It's the racial aspect. The Irish have probably been more oppressed than any other group in history other than perhaps Africans. Outside of enslaved chattel slaves from Africa, the Irish suffered more brutality and oppression from the British, the Americans, and other groups than any other group in history, whether they were immigrants to the United States, being mistreated by the Germans and Swedes who came before them, or they were being starved by the British, who were stealing their potato crops, so that they would, which led to millions of deaths, or they were being conquered and invaded over and over again during basically from about 1000 to about 1600 by the British. The Irish suffered mightily. And I say British because the Scottish were involved in it too. Spain was going well. I didn't say it was going well. I'm saying that Napoleon conquering Spain was not a bad decision. And yes, the continental system was working, which is why he had to try to make an example out of Russia. let me see. I'm too busy chattering on about Canada's war crimes. I'm trying to think about Canadian war crimes. That just sounds like an oxymoron. Of course, what Canada did to the First Nations is pretty bad too. We don't talk enough about, but to answer the question about Ireland, we don't really talk enough about Ireland and what the Irish have gone through in history, and a lot of it is the fact that the Irish themselves have promulgated a lot of mistreatment of groups, particularly American Irish people who have mistreated immigrant groups such as the Italians, Jews, and Chinese, who are all seen in many, many ways as closer, farther away from the Angloid center of whiteness that is usually criticized, the Angloid world, England, Scotland, Ireland, Canada, and the United States, all of which were founded in some way or colonized or conquered by the British. And of course, Ireland itself, you've got a people that are close in many, many ways to the English, but are still oppressed by them. So it's been something that people don't focus on nearly as much. Let me see. Holy Spirit needed Rome's shipping lanes and roads to spread gospel. Do you think inventions play a role in history? Absolutely. I think technology is the engine that makes history move. And I do think that the Christian religion moved well during the Pax Romana because Rome was relatively peaceful, somewhat religiously tolerant, even though they persecuted the Christians greatly, and had an expansive, safe infrastructure that allowed for the travel and passage of ideas and information quite easily from year to year, which is why someone like Paul of Tarsus, who lived in ancient Palestine, was able to get all the way over to Spain and France and Italy. His empire needed to break even every year because they couldn't borrow because the government financial system was a complete mess. Okay. Toyomi Hideyoshi, the greatest? Yes. I don't know about that. Tokugawa Ieyasu is pretty fantastic too. If you're talking about emperors, I'd say Meiji is probably the greatest emperor. Takes power over, destroys the shogunate, and forces Japan into the modern world the way that so that they don't get colonized. Government stole babies into the 80s. Spain, Ireland, Argentina, Australia. Mothers were told babies died. Many victims are still now alive, still searching. Don't know if that's true, but okay. Japanese did surrender in the U.S. Still use nukes, knowing that. Where are you getting your information from? The Japanese surrendered in September. The nukes were used at the beginning of August. August comes before September. Thank you for letting me answer your question. I'm getting my information from here, by the way. Well, I think either way, if someone has issues with Islam, they should stand with Israel, especially considering the fact that Israel is secular. Israel is an ostensibly secular government, and the problem with a lot of people who criticize Israel is they're criticizing it by standards that they use for the West, for the United States, Britain, and France. They do not criticize Israel's behaviors in certain capacities based in relation to the countries that are directly next to them, which is how you usually would do these sorts of things, looking at things culturally and historically. How China operates, if I'm looking at how China has operated its warfare through the centuries, I mean, look at how Japan does it, or the Mongolians, or similar societies in similar contexts. We look at Israel and we immediately judge it based off how the U.S. has operated things. And the implicit notion there is that Israel is a Western country that has a higher moral threshold of behavior and expectations than countries run by theocratic radicals who want to kill me because I don't believe their prophet is a prophet. There you go. Or do I? I've never said I'm not a Muslim. So why are you referring to World War II as World War III? There was 1 and 2. What was 1 and 2? The last two in the 20th century are 2 and 3. The First World War is is the 7 Years' War. You can watch my video on that too. One of my hottest historical takes is that there have been 3 world wars. The 7 Years' War has about the same amount of countries, the same amount of impact, and especially proportionally considering the fact that it's a century and a half before the Industrial Revolution. It's a century and a half before the Great War, and it changes the world scope. It causes 2 revolutions. It leads to the rise of Catherine the Great. It allows Prussia to become the dominant German influence, and it destabilizes the power of the Austrians. Things change mightily because of the 7 Years' War. That's why Britain owns Canada and owned India, or Britain owned Canada and India. It's why the United States becomes a country, and it's why the French have their revolution. It has the wide-sweeping impact, the huge technological changes, and the world is completely different before and afterwards. And it does involve non-Western areas like Africa and India. Let me see here. World War I was the 7 Years' War. Thank you for explaining it. 1975. I saw a Russian film in black and white. I think Ivan. His crowning. They slowly dumped gold coins on his head. Sound familiar? Yes. That's Ivan the Terrible by Sergei Eisenstein. It was made in the 40s. I don't think it's from the 1975. Irish are more racist than the Italians and the Germans. The British, Spanish, and French have always been less violent towards Native Americans and African Americans in North America. Where have you been? You tell me that economic damage done to Britain from 1809 to 1812. Yes, Britain was able to withstand the French. I know. We all know that the British were able to do that. Part of the reason they were able to do that was the Russians were victorious against the against the French. The fact of the matter, though, however, I'm not saying the British had their navy, and their navy kept them afloat. Give it another 10 years. Give it another 5 years. Let Alexander the First go over to Napoleon fully. And I think you would have had a different scenario. I do think it's an interesting hypothetical and what ifs are supposed to be no-nos in history, but I like them, of if the French had continued the continental system and had not lost in Russia, what would Britain have had to do? What would Napoleon have gotten from the British? See, I know you think the British can't lose, but they can, and they do lose. In fact, they lost to the French in 1066 when their entire country was conquered by one solemn French duchy who had no legal right to the claim and was a bastard. There you go. Want to feel better about the English? Just understand that 1,000 years ago, the French basically took over your country. So do you think meth played a role during World War II, World War III, like the printing press did during the Protestant Reformation or the cotton gin during the U.S. Civil War? Inventions don't always play that, but yes, methamphetamines was used by the German High Command quite a lot. Let me see. I am sorry, but I think all countries should be judged by Western standards, and by Western standards, Israel is still not doing anything wrong, and is an ethno state but not a theocracy. Israel's done plenty wrong by any moral standard. And every country that fights a war does something wrong by any moral standard. Civilian casualties are impossible to avoid in any war, especially in modern warfare. I mean, if you look at the ratio of civilian casualties between what the United States did in its last two Middle Eastern wars, where it botched both of them, by the way, and it deserves the moral criticism it gets for it, and Israel and Gaza, it's actually surprisingly lower. It's more proportional from civilian to military deaths between Israel and Gaza in this tiny little strip of land than the United States in the entire swathe of these swarthy countries of Iraq and Afghanistan. But I do think Israel has done plenty of things that they need to explain, and I do think Israel didn't prosecute the war properly in many, many cases, but that doesn't make me an anti-Semite. I'm allowed to say that. And by the way, for all of you people who like Tucker Carlson, I'm allowed to say that. No punishment comes to me. You're allowed to question Israel in the United States because you have freedom of speech. It's this nonsensical obsequiousness that basically says, oh, you're not allowed to criticize Israel. You know that, right? Then somebody criticizes Israel, nothing happens, and then they pretend that they never said that. Is Israel stealing the West Bank just by their settlements? That's one of the things that can probably be criticized. Israel is trying to take over certain parts of the West Bank, and it's not the Israeli government sanctions settlements and different areas of that. Remember, the West Bank was owned by different Arab countries who lost it during fighting. The land eventually became the refuge of the Palestinians. But both Gaza and, if you look at the last 77 years since Israel was founded, Gaza didn't become Israeli until 1967. The West Bank didn't become Palestinian, I think, until the 1990s or 70s. These lands were originally owned by other Arab Middle Eastern countries that wanted to destroy Israel, and still probably implicitly do, even if they're supposedly more moderate. Britain owned Canada until 1982. Pretty much. Not politically, though. Racist leprechauns for charm. I like your background. Yes, it is a nativity background. We're in the Christmas season. I'm in a very giving mood, and that's why we're only an hour out of 2 hours into our special holiday Christmas Q&A. Very Merry Christmas to you. Thank you for your compliment. Nobody can make sense how Israelites became white European Jews. They didn't. Other than, if you're referring to the fact that there were Jews who settled in Europe, adopted their culture, and some of them intermarried, and they became what were known as Ashkenazi Jews, that's probably pretty accurate. It's obviously based on the ancient term of Ashkenaz, who is a son of Japheth, who is the son of Noah, and supposedly from that lineage, Europe is settled, so that is why they're called Ashkenazi Jews. It has its roots in ancient Jewish ideas, ancient Israelites ideas, and nomenclature. So thank you, Ghost Samurai. I think you just learned something you didn't know before. Okay, can you hear me now? Am I finally coming in clear? Yes, finally. Okay, now it's fixed. I don't know why it wasn't fixed. I didn't have the mute sign on. I usually check that every few seconds to see if I can see it or not. And this thing was working fine, and I don't know. I didn't get the sign that it was off because I know when it is muted. So, whatever. Let me get back. I don't know how long I was going on without that. Let me see. I don't know why the super chat didn't pop up, but thank you, Desmond, for saving for that. That's very kind of you. Let me see. But it is a good way to get a super chat. So let's go back to where we were. All right. So what was the last thing that you guys heard me say? And I'm going to take a sip of coffee while you hopefully like and subscribe. And as I suspected, I was right all along. I don't know what was the last thing that I was talking about before the audio cut out. So you're going to have to remind me what it was. So, anyways, I'm not mad. I'm tired of internet troubles and interruptions. There is no reason the audio shouldn't have been working. Yeah, and those who do not hear history are doomed to hear it again. I guess. I don't know. What was I talking about? So, how long was I out for? Because I was saying a bunch of really, really good stuff. Yeah, Harry, that's hilarious. Should make a series of the rise of the Catholic Church from Rome to the Middle Ages and Enlightenment. That would be a fun series. I'm doing my Supreme Court series. I'm almost finished with that. I've got videos planned for my members. So if you become a member, you'll get exclusive access on the Industrial Revolution, something that I've been planning and looking forward to doing for a long time. But I should do a series. That would be a fun series on the rise of the Catholic Church. So, 7 Years' War. I was saying that 7 Years' War is the first world war. Then I was talking. Someone was asking about the Israel thing, and I was simply saying that we judge Israel by standards that the West. In fact, we don't even judge Israel by standards that the West is held to. It's even higher standards than that. I did read what you said about Bush. I said Bush was not an underrated president. He was a bad president. So about 5 minutes. Well, the problem is that's in a lifetime in Friendly Neighborhood History channel where we've got so many questions. Asking questions about Jewish authenticity is anti-Semitic. No, it isn't. Let me see. I'm just looking through the chat now. We're missing the answer to existence. I am opinionated because I am right. And as I suspected, I was right all along. Now, I've been proven wrong about things. It happens once every couple of years. We've been doing this channel for a couple of years, so we're back to that. So maybe it'll come around again like Halley's Comet. But, I mean, it's hard for me to admit that I am wrong, just like it is hard for all of you to admit you are wrong, which is why you are here asking questions, because you want to see what I think so that you can tell me I am wrong. So, all right. Anyways, let's see. Where were we? Elevu, great to see you. A good friend of mine in real life, and thank you for joining us from Texas. Say hello to your wife and daughter for me. It was great to see you a few months ago. Take care now, and a Merry Christmas to you. I do have people who come onto the channel once in a while who are people I know in real life, and Elevu is one of the earliest Friendly Neighborhood historians, and you can be a Friendly Neighborhood historian too if you like and subscribe. And yeah, Elevu's been around for as long as we've been around, which is almost 2 years. We're coming up on 2 years. It's the 1 year anniversary of when I got my smoking jacket, and we're celebrating the season of giving, which is Christmas, and with giving you a 2-hour Q&A where you can get all your questions answered. I wouldn't say that the wars of independence in South America are world wars. They are definitely Latin American geopolitical wars that nobody talks about enough, but Simón Bolívar is quite a fascinating guy in my opinion. But yeah, they are not world wars. And someone asked about the Spanish-American War being a world war. No, the Napoleonic Wars would be the closest to another world war other than the 7 Years' War. Hope cigar comes back. If you guys want to see me smoke a cigar, I don't smoke in the studio just because there's not a lot of ventilation in here, so it'd be nasty. And there's a couch, so I don't want to get it all over the couch. But yeah. Yeah. I don't know where Hars is today. We need Hars, but yeah. What's your opinion on Enver hoax? I don't know who that is. Spanish succession. That's a good one. That's a European war, though. That's not something you don't see the amount of Indians in either North America or South Asia involved in that. This might be a weird question, but since Christianity is not indigenous to Europe, what would it make it alien to Europe? What about Spanish language for Latin America? I don't know. It's how long does something have to be in a particular area to be native to it? No human being, no human tribe, ethnic group is native. If you want to go that strictly, almost everybody comes from somewhere else and settles that particular area. I think you've got to have high hundreds, maybe thousands of years of settlement in a particular area to be the native, and that includes cultural, technological, religious. So you could say that Christianity is native to Europe, but you must also throw the asterisk up that Europe was originally pagan and then most of it was ruled by the Romans. Thank you for joining us from Hamburg. X was his name. The Albanian communist isolationist. Interesting. Kind of like Tito then, if he's an isolationist and a communist at the same time. It arranged all across the world Spanish succession. Not as much as you think. I wouldn't say that it's a good candidate for a world war. The Russo-Japanese war is sometimes referred to as World War Zero. No, I don't see it. I've loved that war. I've covered that war here on the channel. I have a series on both the Russian Tsars and Russian history, so please go check it out. But I don't think that I don't see the Russo-Japanese War as a world war. I think it has implications for the coming Second World War, the Great War, World War I, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, first native human on a different planet will be wild. Yes. So in a way, Spanish is native to Latin America, but Latin America's natives didn't speak Spanish, if you want to go back to that whole thing. You think Islam is native to Persia or no? No. That's tough, because by my standard, yes, Islam is the native religion of Persia in the fact that the Persian people have practiced it, but it's different. It's difficult because you have a more established tradition, written and archaeological record of ancient Persia, which was was polytheistic, had its own paganic religions. Then, of course, you have Zoroastrianism and Ahura Mazda, which I think is the most fun name to say ever. I can't wait to name a dog Ahura Mazda, or get a Persian cat and name it Ahura Mazda. There you go. That's very fitting. The Egyptians, can you say Christianity or Islam is native to them? It's hard to say because you have such an ancient record historically. By that standard, I almost want to go back on what I said before. Conflict must be waged on different continents for world war. Well, in Asia, North America, Africa, Europe. That's the 7 Years' War. Well, what you said about the ancient people of Israel doesn't have the indigenous people of the United States have a right to their land back. So this argument goes both ways, and I love that argument. I have never made the argument that because Israelis are native to their land, they deserve to have a country there. I've never made that argument. I don't use that argument. I don't believe in that argument. Things change. People lose out on their land. But I will say this. If the Chinese were thrown out of China, they would probably want, in the centuries to come, to go back there and reestablish their country. The Kingdom of Israel was a far more established geopolitical entity than Native American nations were. Native Americans were transient and itinerant. The Maya and the Aztecs are great exceptions, and the Iroquois are another great exception. This is no insult to the Native Americans, by the way, but land established borders, private property, cities, these were not common in Native America or amongst the First Nations of Turtle Island, if you want to use that terminology, or amongst the Aborigines of Australia. You have you have land claims, and you have particular land claims that are not honored by the Native Americans amongst each other. But if you're going to go just by the semblance, on one end, it's not a one-to-one comparison to compare the Israelites and the Jews to the Native Americans, because you have various different tribes of Native Americans that are quite different than each other, which when you look at the Israelites, yes, you have tribes, but they are all Jews in one way or another. So it's a continent, it's a far out progression. You've got a small slip of land that's the size of New Jersey. So I don't think that that's a fair one-to-one comparison on the edge geopolitically. But I don't make the argument that the Israelis deserve the land because they were there first. I don't. But I think that it's weird because every other civilization in history, French, Egyptian, if you were to dispossess them and they had an established country, they'd want it back at some point. I don't know what GWOT, I don't know what that is. So I can't answer you there. Thank you, Obscure. You're very kind. I appreciate your wisdom in discerning my knowledge. I heard again Gettysburg, the biggest Western Hemisphere battle. I say second battle of Tenochtitlan. What do you say? We just don't have the records from Tenochtitlan, but I'd say that's probably bigger in the sense of scope. Global war on terrorism. Yeah, I don't know if that's a world war though. Tartaria is the land of the Tartars, which were the Turkic peoples who, with the help of the Mongols, controlled large sections of what is now Russia and Central and Western Asia. Isn't the Garden of Eden in Iraq? I don't know. I don't know, man. This isn't Wendy's. Let me see here. I think it doesn't matter who has been there first, Israelis or Palestinians. I think we need to stand with Israel because that is a white strategy against Islam. Mesoamerica is really interesting. I love Mesoamerica. What does GWOT stand for, though, Bill? Yes. See, people don't, they're asking each other their ages. In the Christmas spirit, they're sharing. I don't share my age. I don't share where I'm from. You know that I'm an American, but you don't know what kind of American I am or where I'm from. People don't know my political views, my religious views. I keep it all locked up tight. When we get to 20,000, I'll do a full identity reveal. So that's more of an incentive to tell all your friends and family about the Friendly Neighborhood History channel and to like and subscribe because we're at 10,500. We're barely halfway there. Let me see. Andrew Carnegie, Scottish immigrant, good read. I should read that. His autobiography would be fascinating. So do you agree what Israel has done so far with self-defense and there was no genocide? No, there was no genocide in Gaza. There's none. I got a lot of criticism when I said there is a twinge of ethnic cleansing going on. But I was admitting to the suffering of the Gazan people. I wasn't trying to minimize anyone's suffering. I do think that Israel mishandled many aspects of this war. But I think they did so in a small strip of land, extremely small strip of land, with razor-thin critical analysis where in many cases they could do no right. If their objectives were muddled throughout much of the conflict, they didn't handle the PR correctly, but I don't think they cared about that. I think their job was to destroy Hamas and to release the hostages, and they've kind of achieved that. Random thought. When you travel to Africa from the U.S., technically you're time traveling. Let that sink in. Yeah, if I went to the state next to me, I might be moving time zones. Is that time traveling? Cute, but no. Let me see here. You should make a series. Oh, I already read that. I'm reading through the past chat to see who's asked me that. Who invented internet sound failures? Apparently, I did. Talk about child trafficking run by our government. What are you talking about? People were asking about Epstein earlier, Updog, and I was simply saying that powerful people in powerful positions being perverted and doing evil things is nothing new in history. And I hate to sound callous, but it's true. Let me see here. We know a little bit. Calais has the Garden of Eden. Okay, then. All human history is a story of migration. True, and how people react to that migration. Are you familiar with the idea that the Iroquois are the Romans of the America? Yeah, and they actually are pretty close. You look at their confederacy. Iroquois, by the way, is based off of their language. Almost every Native American nation, which is a conglomerate of tribes like the Sioux, the Navajo, the Algonquin, and from the first Thanksgiving, by the way, which I've done a lot on that too, and the Iroquois are a collection of tribes. And they are all named that after, usually by the French, the Sioux and Algonquin, Iroquois. These are French names applied to them based off of their language. Let me see here. What conventions are there in modern warfare? Well, you got the Geneva Conventions. You don't use you try to avoid biological and chemical warfare. You try to minimize civilian casualties. You give warning to civilians if civilian areas are going to be attacked. You do not continue to attack people who are surrendering. Stuff like that. You accept surrenders. You allow for peace talks. These are kind of laid bare by the League of Nations after the Second World War and after the Third World War are really honed down with the Geneva Conventions. I know your name is Friendly Neighborhood Historian. No, I know you're a free speech absolutist. I know you are non-sovereign American. No, you believe in higher power. No, you are below 25 in age. Thank you for all those guesses. Some of them are true, and some of them I have nothing to do with. So thank you, Vincent. Good to see you. If Tartaria was born from Turkish Tartars, how come in maps 1600s all names within Tartaria resemble something closer to the Russian, and then maps after the 1600s is more Asiatic? Because they were in that region for quite some time and were slowly but surely conquered and swallowed up by the Russians, by the Muscovites as they were known. Look at Ivan the Terrible in the 16th century. No, you are pro-immigration, critical of woke, and I know you don't like neocons and FDR. I haven't talked about neocons. I don't talk about political groups that I dislike. I don't like any form of extremism. That's why I'm a free speech absolutist. That part is true. Yeah. Let me see here. Can you go into depth on how the Japanese were preparing for surrender before the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which the U.S. knew? I read the Tokyo trial contradicting AI answers. I don't know enough about that. I don't think it's true. The Japanese were not willing to surrender. The Americans were preparing for a land invasion. The Japanese knew all of this. The Americans were trying to get the Soviets involved. The Japanese knew that too, and they wouldn't stop. Surely even you've got to admit what Israel is doing is sick and violates every standard of modern warfare. No. I mean, it's civilized. War is not civilized. Do I think that bombing hospitals is right? No. Do I think putting your military bases at the bottom of hospitals so you can make those hospitals a target is civilized? Absolutely not. The question I have is, why is this happening? Not just, it's happening. So, I mean, you lost the Napoleon argument. I don't want to argue with you about this. It's a political topic. I don't think, I've talked about how Israel hasn't done things right. I mean, even by the standards of with fighting an insurgency terrorists, what they're doing is completely horrendous. No, it's not. No, it really isn't. Has there been overreach? Absolutely. Has it been wrong? Yes. Have I been critical of it? Yes. Have I said for the war to stop when it was going on? If you watched this channel and paid attention, then yes, you know that. I'm trying to distract from the politics, but people don't let me. You can be firmly critical of Israel's decisions and mismanagement of the war, especially on the PR front. But you can't be ignorant of what Hamas does and what the Palestinians do to bait Israel into that. The Taliban did that. They put military equipment under hospitals. Did you see NATO going around dropping bombs on hospitals across Afghanistan and Iraq? Do you know how many civilian casualties? No. But do you know how many civilian casualties there were? And by the way, Gaza had more hospitals before the war started per capita than any other country in the world, if you want to consider it a country. So the hospitals being a target, these things happen in warfare. And when Hiroshima was bombed, the United States didn't care about hospitals at all. So that's not true. Britain bombed a building next to a hospital which accidentally collapsed the wall of a hospital. Yes, countries accidentally bomb things all the time. And by the way, the Israelis warned about the bombings that they did. That's completely true. The leaflet system and all of that. So I don't understand the problem. And there was a parliamentary inquiry into whether it was a war crime or not. Yes, thank you. You're once again proving my point that we apply Western standards to Israel, surrounded by people who are not Western and who want to destroy them constantly. Standards we would never apply if Britain was surrounded by countries that constantly want to destroy them, because they would probably firebomb a city that only had civilian targets. Oh wait, they already did that, and it was Dresden. There you go. So the proportional, if you add proportional and surmise that America was surrounded by Canada and Mexico that wanted to destroy it constantly and was constantly trying to get away from bombs, that was constantly trying to bomb certain areas in those regions, I think there'd be a lot more civilian casualties on the table. Yes. No, the combatants in the hospital could be wounded, but some of them weren't. There was military bases at the bottom of hospitals. They did it to bait Israel, and Israel took the bait. I never said it was a good thing. I'm saying it's not as simple to just say, oh, that's wrong, and that makes it horrendous. I think you don't know what horrendous means, and for a Brit, that's pretty sad. Yes, you think that everyone who disagrees with you is insane. You think Napoleon was insane. You think that Trump is insane. You think that everything is insane. You keep using these words. You're muddling the use of those words. So, honestly, the Israel and Palestine conflict shouldn't matter to Americans. We have our own problems to focus on. The internet and social media are gaslighting us into caring. Well, I'm a historian. I care about geopolitics only so much as I understand the historical nature of the issue. So I'm going to look at things based off history and morals. And I've said many times that I don't believe what Israel did was right. I believe that many missteps were made in the war, but it's not an ethnic cleansing. It's not a genocide. It's none of these buzzwords. We're just devaluing what genocide actually is. It's just absolute utter nonsense. And by the way, it's people in America who say they're America first, who are really just secretly obsessed with blaming Jews for all of their problems, who have made this war a bigger thing than it needed to be. It's Americans who made this a problem, a bigger problem than it needed to be. So people who say we only want to focus on America and we don't care about that, they're part of usually subscribe to and listen to people who have made it such a big issue. Napoleon wasn't insane. I just think he made the wrong decision. His decision-making process progressively got worse. Yes, Donald Trump is actually insane. Yes. Here's insanity. Here's just utter insanity. Judging a Middle Eastern war by Western standards and comparing it to the British because you're so obsessed with Britain and Britain being right all the time that you can't see a completely different context. And bombing hospitals is horrendous. No, in the sense of what? Is it? Yes, it is horrendous. Is it any more horrendous than any other action of war? I don't know. Hello. No, I do not. Because Islam is like that. I don't know what you're talking about. What about the Greater Israel Project? That's a project that some Israelis on the far right believe in. A lot of them have a logic that because they're surrounded by enemies who want to destroy them, they want to conquer large areas. It's not an official government program. It's not what the Israelis are ostensibly trying to do, and it's not happening. It's not. So, are we talking about the genocide in Gaza? First off, there's no genocide in Gaza. Second off, we're supposed to be talking about history, but people don't want to talk about history because they're focused on other things. I don't know what mitzvah b'peh is. I just don't. We were in the Middle East for 23 years up until 2021. That is a Middle Eastern conflict, is it not? Yes. Yes, I just think that it's very strange to judge that by the standards of a country that is completely removed from the Middle East, that is not existentially threatened by other Middle Eastern countries surrounding it, including terrorist organizations that want to destroy it. Tojo was a convicted war criminal. Yes, he was, and he was executed for that at just 63 by his own government. It was absolutely genocide in Gaza akin to the Holocaust. No, there isn't, and it's not akin to the Holocaust. The Israelis in Germany did not perpetrate attacks, have terrorist organizations, and seek to demolish and destroy the German country by any stretch of the imagination. You have a war. It's a war. War is different. So, thank you, Tracy, for saying that. I appreciate a lot of people feel that way. A lot of people are incorrect about that, however. I wish we could put sanctions and a ban on Israel, but USA will give them another $1 trillion for free, everything in interest. The United States hasn't given them $1 trillion. And the U.S. still is in the Middle East. Yes. The flag of the Greater Israel Project is the IDF's uniform, and Bibi definitely believes in it. Isn't that just the Israeli flag? I don't know if Netanyahu believes in it, and he certainly isn't acting it out. We were in the Middle East for 20 years in Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria. Are they not Middle Eastern conflicts? Yes. But Britain is a country that is not in the Middle East. That is my point. Did NATO ever resort to those tactics? No. NATO was a coalition of countries that had support from everywhere. Who was Israel getting support from other than really the United States? And not even militarily. So there was no Israelis in Germany. They were European Jews. European Jews who are Jews as in the Jews who live in Israel. So why do oh, for goodness sakes. Thank you, Star Fox, for proving that using caps lock doesn't make you necessarily correct. I love how you go from Israel and how they handle a war to rabbis are bad. Because you're probably an anti-Semite. Anyways, NATO also doesn't have a 1,000-year-old blood feud with Syria. True. Even the Israelis have admitted that it's a genocide. No, they haven't. Some of them think that, and some of them are wrong. I'm not going to admit it. I'm sorry. I know too much about history and too much about how genocide actually works to admit it. I mean, if they went back in there and just started carpet bombing and killing as many possible people as they could, and they leveled the complete population, then it'd be a genocide. They were being accused of ethnic cleansing and genocide even before the war, and it's absolute nonsense. And I'm not an Israel apologist. I am a historian. I am talking about history, but for some reason people want to talk about this. So, I signed the Emancipation Proclamation. What have you ever done, young fellow? I've answered a bunch of trolls on the internet, but thank you, Abraham Lincoln. It's good to have you back here. Oh, mitzvah b'peh, guys. Yeah, I know what mitzvah b'peh. If that's what you're referring to because of your caps lock nonsense, then yes, I know what mitzvah b'peh is. And it's gross and weird, but it is often conflicted in many ways and compared to female genital mutilation, which happens in the Middle East. And yeah. You don't know anything about genocide if you can't see what's happening and when it's ongoing. What is genocide? What is a genocide? No, they do not do that. I love it. These people, where do you come from? Where are you? The International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, who are courts in charge of the stuff, have declared war crimes and genocide. They're wrong. I'm sorry, but they're wrong. People can be wrong. Courts can be wrong. Just like the Supreme Court was wrong, in your opinion, Harry. Courts are wrong all the time. There's no such thing as international law. Where is that written? There is no such thing as international law. Laws are made by countries over particular groups of people. Let me see. I wanted to get back to the history and answering questions. We have about a half hour left for you to answer questions, and I'm at 1%, so I should go in charge. So where were we? Quick detour as I plug in. I didn't even know I was at 1%. I was having such a good time answering all of you fine people that I did not know how late it had gotten. But we've got about another half hour, so please ask your questions. I'll be happy to answer them. Was Alexander Nevsky complicit in the Mongol conquest of Russia? No, he just simply wanted to prevent Novgorod from being conquered, and he actually did it. Then he beat the Teutonic Knights. The guy was pretty incredible for what he did in retaining Russian identity. He wasn't complicit. It was a one-judge court, then yes, but these are courts with more than 20 judges. Who cares if it's more than 20 judges? 20 judges can get it wrong. The Supreme Court has 9 justices. Please talk about how historically Islam has been very evil. There's plenty of religions that have been very, very evil. If you want to talk about how Islam started with the conquest of Mecca in the revenge after the Hijra, after Muhammad was thrown out, it created a psychological religious motif whereby I think Islam, in many ways, even the most violent sectors of it, believe they are the victims and they are simply getting justice from Allah when they commit horrible acts of violence, because ever since the Hijra, when Muhammad was kicked out of Mecca, which didn't exist in the 7th century, but neither here nor there, they believe that they have been persecuted and the victim. Let me see here. Why are we debating, may I ask? We were supposed to be asking questions about history and social sciences, but everybody wants to know my opinion, a historian's opinion about Gaza, and I'm giving as informative one as I can. Do you think it's possible to have another ice age? I mean, we're in kind of a mini ice age right now, so... Have you ever heard of Timothy Ferris? He wrote the book called The Coming of Age in Milky Way. Excellent book. Thank you, Abraham Lincoln. I will definitely take your suggestion because you are a voracious reader. Why Zionists have become a dirty word? Because the internet is full of people who don't understand what Zionism actually is. Most of them are of European descent who don't understand that their European ancestors committed horrible acts of anti-Semitism, which prompted the Zionists to do what the Zionists did and return to Israel. In New York, a large portion of rabbis were already caught organ stealing. Yeah, where? Where are you getting this from? That's not true. I mean, is it possible that a rabbi once harvested organs? Yes. Any more so than it's possible that a pastor or an imam did it? Yes. What do you call the study of ancient Greek or German pottery? Plate Teutonics. Ha! Thank you, Julian. That was funny. I beg to differ with you, but there is such a thing as international law. No, there is no such thing as international. Who makes it? Who decides it? How does it apply? How do you enforce it? Who enforces international law? Law is impossible if it cannot be enforced. There is no such thing as international law. If the United States didn't basically kind of semi-enforce it, there would be no international law. The League of Nations didn't work. So I hate to sound like an American chauvinist, but really it's the United States just deciding when it wants to enforce something and when it doesn't. Before being in politics, photos of future presidents with current presidents, Trump, Reagan, Clinton, Kennedy, Roosevelt, Lincoln. I love those photos. You got Roosevelt looking out the window in New York, seeing the funeral procession of Abraham Lincoln in 1865. Globalism equals communism equals Zionism. Yes, I love the false equivocation of 3 things that are totally different from each other. Globalism is basically a form of hyper free trade capitalism. Communism is anti-capitalism. Zionism is the belief that Jews should have their own country. Stop trying to gaslight the public with your propaganda. What propaganda have I spewed? Where have I spewed propaganda? I'm not spewing any propaganda. And I'm not being paid for it either. I mean, the British are responsible for Israel. The British are responsible for the mandate of Palestine, and eventually, when that mandate ended, the land was supposed to be divided. The Arabs never agreed to an actual division of the land. So when the Israelis created their country, it led to dispossession and war, which led to dispossession of Jews from all over the Middle East and North Africa, which is why if you go to Israel, you won't meet a bunch of Ashkenazi-looking rabbis, although you will. There will be plenty of them. You'll meet people who are Middle Eastern-looking, who you would mistake for being Arab, who are Jews. Do you agree with Japan's retaliation after the U.S. tried to cripple their economy and meddle with their affairs they had no business getting into? The United States was paying lip service to Britain because of the Atlantic Charter, and they were worried about Japanese aggression against the French, which would lead to the Japanese eventually attacking the British too. So, no, I don't think the United States deserved Pearl Harbor. I love that argument, but I don't think it's true. Which languages predated English in the Middle Ages? Scotland, Northern Highlands, Celtic, Gaelic, German, kind of a rudimentary German. If you're talking about early English, those are derivatives of those, and a little bit of French and Latin. What are your thoughts on the emu war? Australia tries to stop their emu population from growing, and then in 1932, and then basically agrees to stop killing them off in one of the most hilarious wars in human history. Where do Talmudic Jews claim Jesus spends eternity? You see, this is just such incredible oversimplification. This is what happens when you get your arguments from the internet and Candace Owens. You spend, ooh, I got him now because this is what the Jews believe. This is what one rabbi wrote about in the Talmud, and you think that it's going to affect me? It's the meme of, I feel sorry for you. I don't think about you at all. What do I care what the Talmud says about Jesus? I'm a historian. Yes, I care about it from a historical lens. Yes, it proves and decries the growing fissure between Christians and Jews at that time in the first few centuries after the death of Jesus of Nazareth. But, I mean, if you're doing that as a gotcha, so that I'm going to say, oh, I was wrong about the Jews. This isn't a Christian channel. It's a historical channel. I'm not coming at this from a Christian perspective. I'm coming at it from as objective a perspective as I can as a historian. Yes, I give my opinions, but I think they're informed by the facts and by what's logical and clear before me, based off of history. So the Talmud claims, not Talmudic Jews, because there's many Talmudic Jews who don't believe it, even of the most ultra-Orthodox, that Jesus is burning an excrement in hell. Now, go and ask 5 Jews what they think of Jesus of Nazareth. Not one of them is going to say that to you. So, even North Korea has agreed that there is such a thing as international law, at least on paper. I don't care what North Korea has agreed to. I know it makes you feel good in the supranational category to have international law that people follow, but people do not follow international laws. So, you're proving more and more you are a conservative. It has nothing to do with conservative. There is no such thing as international law. International law. Harry, how can you say that I am a conservative when I am simply making an argument that America is the one that if there is international law, is the only one that can enforce it properly? How is that a conservative talking point? I say plenty of things on the channel that conservatives hate, and they have every reason to hate. I insult conservatives more than I insult liberals. So just because I don't agree with you, that makes me a conservative. That's nonsense. Just because I say I don't see international laws existing. It exists as an idea, but law has to be enforceable. The only way, how is international law that has condemned Israel, how has that been enforced? Because it's been waiting for the United States, because the United States is the one that enforces international law. Even if there is such a thing as international law, and it says Israel's committing genocide, the international law is anti-Semitic, or it's wrong. I'm not saying that international law doesn't exist because of Israel. If it does exist, it can be wrong. Can't laws be wrong? The U.S. isn't enforcing at all. It's been Europe driving most of the enforcements in the past decade. Yeah, that's why they were able to stop the bombings in Gaza. International law cannot be law if it cannot be enforced. What has America enforced? I don't know, ending a bunch of wars. That's something America's enforced. The bringing home the hostages. I don't think Keir Starmer had anything to do with bringing home the hostages, but you're just in a competition because you want to criticize America. That's fine. You have every right to criticize America. It's not my job to defend America. My job is to look at things from what I can see based off of historical perspectives. International law meant screw all to the Germans in the 30s. It meant nothing to the Soviets, who helped determine international law while they were also running a totalitarian state in the 50s and 60s. So I just don't understand. Zionism is the belief that Jews are God's chosen people. No, that is not Zionism. Let me see. Have you ever seen the movie Highlander and Connor? Yes, I love that movie. It's a great movie. Thank you for asking me about that. Really enjoyable movie. Christopher Lambert, Sean Connery. By hostile Arab Muslim Islamists surrounded Israel is. Yes. Why are you speaking like Yoda, Sean? Of course they did, and North Korea is violating most of it. If there is international law, North Korea recognizing it is rich because North Korea doesn't care about it. But the U.S. decided it's going to prop up Israel, so here we are. So you just admitted that I'm right. That if the U.S. decides it's going to do what it wants, then there is an international law, Harry, and the U.S. is the one that determines it. That's basically what you just admitted. Did Israel win the Holy Land of Jerusalem? Jesus walks. I don't know what you mean by that. Happy holidays to you, YouTube Blue Butterflies. Welcome to my 2-hour Q&A where I'm answering questions, should be about history, for Christmas. I'm in the spirit of giving, and so I've given an hour and 45 minutes going on 2 hours just for everybody before Christmas. How many Christians did Israel kill in 2025? I don't know. How many? Do you think it's like 3 billion or 4 billion or 5 billion? I don't know. I don't know how many Christians did Israel kill. How many Christians live in Israel? And how many of those Christians fear for their life constantly because of Israelis and Jews? This is like when I see people complaining that Jews spit on Christians in Israel, and then I think it's so funny because Christians get killed in other countries right next to Israel, but you want to focus on that. I find that so strange. There isn't such a thing as international law. Sorry, which side of the political aisle currently pushes that agenda? What? Just because that's something that the right pushes doesn't mean that I'm a right-winger. I'm a free spirit. I think what I want. And I have totally different reasons for believing that than other people do. And I'm not an American chauvinist. I think America has plenty of flaws, and I think America has made plenty of mistakes, and I think America has backed Israel too much. It's just fascinating that I've got a very moderate perspective on all of this, yet everybody thinks I'm an extremist because I won't bend my moral and historical laws to say genocide and ethnic cleansing. Unless you want those words to mean nothing at all, I'm not budging on that. If you are conservative, why are you okay with Islam? I've never said I'm conservative. I don't reveal my politics. I'm okay with Islam because I think there's a lot of beauty in Islam. Just like I think there's a lot of beauty in skepticism and in Christianity and Buddhism. And there's people on my channel who are of all backgrounds and all faiths. I embrace anyone who wants to learn about history. And Harry, maybe you're just too far on the left, is the problem. I'm not saying you're a right-winger. I'm just saying your stance on international law is a right-wing opinion. Wow, fascinating. So is my stance on free speech. So what? How does that prove I'm a conservative? I take umbrage to that. Why do the Turks and Kurds hate each other? The Kurds have wanted their own state and land in the Middle East for a long time and have not gotten it. They've had semi-autonomous regions in parts of Persia and Syria, but they have never been treated. They've been oppressed by different empires for centuries. The Ottomans. If you really want to know why do people hate the Turks, the Ottomans. The Ottomans caught their genocides, actual genocides, by the way, where millions of people were systematically targeted and they tried to destroy them. And they didn't do it under the auspices of war, although they kind of did it under the auspices of war, but they weren't directly at war with them. It happened during the Armenian genocide. So yeah. Where's the oldest university in the world? Is it Bologna? Or is it Oxford? It's one of those, or it might be in the Middle East. I'm not sure. And also, do you see a pattern with current politics? I see a pattern with everything. That's why I'm a historian. Ending loads of wars, surely you haven't fell for that. I'm saying there have been wars that the United States has been able to end and enforce the ending of them, and the most obvious one is the Israel-Gaza war. At least for now, that war ended. The Iranian-Israeli war ended. Wars end. I'm not saying that Donald Trump deserves all the credit for that and he's so great and all of this stuff. I'm saying that the United States has the ability to enforce its own international law. Britain has no ability to enforce that whatsoever because the empire is gone and the sun has set on your empire. And I'm only answering you in a way you can understand. I'm answering you in a way you can understand. I'm not trying to make this about American chauvinism. Yes, I am definitely pro-Israel and a conservative because I don't agree with you. Yes, that's fascinating. How am I pro-Israel? I simply say that there is no genocide, Israel has a right to defend itself, and the Palestinians should not be killed and should have their own state. If that's a pro-Israel position, then most people are pro-Israel. Islam promotes child marriage, such beauty. Where and how? Starving people with a siege seems like it might be at least a war crime or genocide. Starving people with a siege. Is that what happened? I mean, yes, a lot of that did happen. There are plenty of things I've said before that Israel did wrong in the war. That's not are war crimes a possibility? Yes. Is genocide a possibility? I don't think so. So, they killed 44 Christians. Wow. And how many Christians died in Nigeria? I just, what does that have to do with it? What does you bringing up Christians have to do with me and my channel? That makes Israel terrible. Yes, Israel did terrible things. Yes, horrible things happen in war, and sometimes people overreact and mishandle. I don't think there's any war where you can say a country didn't overreact. And I find it fascinating that a British guy who loves British history, who is an Anglophile, is constantly ignoring Dresden. And how that is basically about a fourth of the people were lost in a couple of days as have died in Gaza. in 2 years. So, anyways, other questions. You don't even know Islam. Surah 65:4 and it's Tifars. Go read more. Well, why don't you post it instead of just saying I haven't read it? I haven't read all of the Quran. No. So, your view on immigration is liberal, and your view on free speech is conservative. My view on everything is my view. I don't want labels on my views. I don't want to be a conservative YouTuber. I don't want to be a liberal YouTuber. I want to be a YouTuber I want to be a historian who has a YouTube channel who has certain opinions. And the reason I talk about the free speech opinions so much is because I'm on a public platform, and I believe everybody should have a right to express their opinions. And I don't want one day for my opinions to not be able to be expressed because I said mean things to people. Friendly History hit my parked car in 2024 and drove off. Very sorry. Didn't mean to do that. But we weren't supposed to bring that up. I thought we agreed hush money. Who has the gold makes the rules. That's true. I think it's a toss-up between one in Morocco, which started out as a madrasa, and then one in Bologna, but the first one I think was in Sicily. Yeah, but I wonder which is the longest continuous one. So, yes, let's go back to arguing about Napoleon, the good old days. Muhammad consummated his marriage when Aisha was 9 years old. That's all I need to know about Islam. The Virgin Mary was like 13. Merry Christmas. I mean, I hope you're okay with that. I mean, maybe you're not a Christian. Maybe you're a skeptic. Maybe you're an atheist. Maybe you're a Jew. Maybe you're a Buddhist. That's fine. But people who, I mean, to be fair, I've had it done to me where I say something and then somebody's like, well, look at what they did to Christians. I literally had that just a few minutes ago. It doesn't matter to me because I'm not talking about Christianity. I'm not coming at this from a Christian lens. So in the sense of you're not Christian either. That's fair, then. Yeah. But I'm not a skeptic. Well, I am a skeptic. I think you should be skeptical about a lot of things, but I'm not one of those proud skeptics who's like, yeah, I'm an atheist and there is no God and aren't I intellectually superior? There's the university in Morocco that's the oldest one in the world. It's Morocco, then. That's probably part of the Islamic Golden Age. So you talk about Islam being beautiful. There you go. So ZR, it's perfectly fair for you to criticize Islam for that. Of course, what's your moral basis for criticizing anything? But that's another debate for another time. Ida means the waiting period after a divorce. Islam promotes child marriage. Okay? Thank you for telling me that about Ida. I don't know what that has to do with what I'm talking about. I asked you to put the surah that you supposedly quoted. A surah is a verse from the Quran, by the way, in the chat. Will Space Force be able to sustain the future of the United States on the planet? If not this planet, then another one. Well, you certainly talk like a conservative. How do I talk like a conservative? Just because I don't think Israel's committing a genocide? What conservative supports a two-state solution? Conservatives have historically not supported that. If you really think I'm a conservative, go listen to what I've talked about LGBTQ history. Listen to what I say about the American president in passing. Let me see here. But if Harry calls you conservative, maybe I can call you liberal because you are not critical of Islam the way Islam deserves. And maybe you're too critical of Islam. And maybe I'm mixed. Maybe I'm a moderate. Maybe I'm a right-winger. Maybe I'm a left-winger. The whole point is that you don't know, because my identity is sacred to me, but history is also sacred, and that's what I want to talk about. I think it's a religion that is highly toxic, divided the world, and has led to immense suffering around the world in recent years. I fundamentally disagree with the idea it is a pacifist or religion. I don't think it's an openly violent religion. However, people use it that way, which should be loudly condemned and is loudly corrupt. There you go for us. Excellent summary, Harry, and I'm probably pretty much in the same spot, except you don't know if I am Muslim or not. No, actually, Adam, thank you for educating me because I don't know everything. Bill, thank you for being with us. I'll see you another time, hopefully. Sorry it got boring. And thank you for the gift, Vincent. I really appreciate it. We're in the last 10 minutes, so you know what? I'm going to try to wrap this up with less geopolitics and more history. And my phone is at a high enough percentage where I can return to my native land, assuming other people aren't living there. Nope, nobody's living there. Good. Now I can sit down. There you go. That's how that works, by the way. Saw this week, border wall between Gaza and Egypt. Legend has it U.S. paid for it. If so, there's that, but no U.S.-Mexico wall. Funds where Gaza was built. Funny. True. The wall between Gaza and Egypt and the United States is going to pay for it. Interesting timeline we're in. Okay, I'm back in my usual spot. Look it up and read the Safars. It's too long to copy and paste. So the Safar is the explanation for the Surah, and supposedly the Safar and the Surah excuse child marriage. Except that most religious texts and most religious groups, or even not religious groups, most societies were okay with child marriage before and after Islam. And in that area of the world, too. Two-state solution. There is a state called Israel that everyone can live under freely. Why is there a need for a Palestinian state? Also, Arabs have so many states. Because the Palestinians are not distinctly Arabs. Some of them are, but some of them aren't. The smells of Christmas are the smells of childhood. Richard Paul Evans. I love that quote. So, anyways. Other questions about history or social studies. It's good to see you, James, by the way. We've been going for 2 hours answering... The bulk of our questions, believe it or not, were history, except people wanted to go on about Islam, and they want to go on about Gaza, they want to go on about a bunch of other stuff. Excuse me. Except child marriage is not widespread in Christian countries today. No, but it was in the past. The government of Israel wanted to ship the Palestinians, and the government of Israel wanted to ship the Palestinians in Gaza to the Sudan. I would call that ethnic cleansing. Okay. Is that during the war so that they could avoid being destroyed? Did Egypt open up its borders to let Palestinians in, or did they close the borders because they didn't want a revolution? Which, by the way, it's the second one. Jews in Israel aren't even native to that land. You're being biased. No, that's not true. They are native to that land, but thank you for proving, Star Fox, that after screaming at me for all of this time, you can actually not use caps lock. Thank you. That's incredible. It matters because we have a puppet Benjamin talking about Judeo-Christian values that don't exist. The majority of U.S. civilians don't like Israel. Our government stops representing us. The American founding fathers would be very, very surprised at this idea that Judeo-Christian values don't exist, because that's exactly where they got their ethical values for founding America from. Sorry, but they do exist. Maybe they're not being practiced by Israel. Maybe not everyone who calls themselves Jews are Jews, but they do exist. Society's being okay with it is different from religious promotion. Okay, I'm trying to think of a tantamount religious promotion in other religions to that. There are some verses in the Talmud that seem to suggest that it could be that child marriage is okay. Christianity has the Virgin Mary story, so religions do sometimes condone the marriage of very young children. One had agreed to move with the times and change its morals for good, while the other hasn't changed its morals in the countries that still practice in a majority way. Yeah, Christianity, at least in the West, is not a pernicious religion. And Islam is usually not a pernicious religion, but in the Middle East, where the most Muslims are present, it is a pernicious religion. However, the most populous Muslim countries, Indonesia is a great example of this, are extraordinarily peaceful compared to the Middle East. They would have never called those values Judeo-Christian. They would have just said Christian. No. Sorry, but no. The values of the ethics that the Christians developed are found where? Where did Christianity get its ethics from? Historically speaking, since this is a history channel, where did Christianity historically get its ethics from? Where did Christianity come from? Christianity just doesn't appear in a vacuum. Psyop by Ben Shapiro. I don't even know what that means. Why is there two people talking about this? I don't know. I don't know. Would people just want to argue about all of that stuff? I'm trying to answer questions about history and social studies, and people are asking me about other stuff. Ooh, the Roman Empire. That'd be fun. What's your source for her age being 13? As far as I know, it's an idea that is being a possibility in Roman Catholic space is not a guarantee, and I don't hold to that fallible opinion. It's a woman was eligible for marriage in ancient civilizations as soon as she could menstruate. So assuming that she got her period around that age, I don't know what the average age is for ancient women to get their periods, because I know a lot about history, but I don't know everything about history. The Virgin Mary could have been as young as 12 or 11 even, or 13. Why? I'm sorry that I have to talk about this, but I have to talk about this. Why do Jews think Jesus is burning in hellfire and excrement? They don't. There's one passage in the Talmud that says that. Do you think the Roman Empire was quite a moral place compared to the rest of the world at its time? Yes, I don't think they get enough. That's a great question, Harry. I don't think they get enough credit for being moral. There was a lot of religious toleration in the Roman Empire. The Christians and the Jews kind of deride this, but it's true. There was a decent amount of religious toleration as long as worship of the Romans gods was on the uh, uh, on the scale. But the truth of the matter is, the Romans, the Pax Romana, allowed for the cultural, ethnic, economic, and religious exchange of ideas for centuries. So Hellenistic culture was extremely popular with the Romans. The Greeks were popular. The Egyptian cults of Egyptian gods were worshipped by Roman emperors in the 4th and 5th centuries. The barbarians didn't see as much tolerance of their societies, but the other previous empires, be they Greek or Egyptian, were quite honored by the Romans. And the Romans were quite interested in that. And they saw them as inferior, but they didn't see them as completely inferior, and they thought they had a lot to learn from Greek philosophy and wisdom and from ancient Egyptians and scholars like Ptolemy, for instance, who gave the ancient world its understanding of astronomy. So the Romans were very chauvinistic, but they were also, especially for their time, extremely open to the integration of different cultures and ideas and fashions as long as they were subsidiary to Rome. And I'm talking about during the Pax Romana, from the time of the Emperor Augustus until about the end of Marcus Aurelius' reign in 180 AD, about 200 years where Rome was extremely stable. But good question. We should not humanize Muslims. We should. She was 14. People died young. People did die young. So I get that. People were married young because people died young and things like that did happen. But that doesn't change. But is a woman, even in that time period where people were forced to grow up earlier because they died earlier, really mature enough to handle all of that? And then you slap on that the mythology or the religious story or the theology, whatever you want to call it, of you are going to give birth to the Son of God, who is a divine Messiah who will save his people from their sins. That's got to be a heavy weight on a girl. And you're going to marry this guy who's older than you. You're still going to marry him, but you may or may not have relations with him afterwards. It's heavy stuff. Modern Talmudic Judaism isn't the origins of Christian values. Modern Judaism began. No, I never said Talmudic Judaism. I am saying that ancient Jewish religious and ethical practices based in the Old Testament, based in the Ten Commandments, based in the laws of Moses, what they attribute it to Moses, is inspirational for Christians as well, which is why it's called Judeo-ethics, Judeo-Christian ethics. Yes, they say that the country of Rome is the embodiment of their religion. It wasn't that they had one God or that they believed Jesus. No, they were okay with Jesus being a God, the Romans were. They just didn't want them to deny the Roman political superiority or the divinity of the emperor. Again, you're equating society practice with Christianity because of a fallible opinion that was posed as a possibility. It is a possibility, but I think it's a possibility that garners some weight. Romans were interested in esoteric Egyptian practices. True. So calling the values Judeo-Christian isn't really fair. It's a psyop term to create a false sense of unity. I'm sorry, but that term has existed for a long, long time. And I'm sorry, but you don't have the development of Christian ethics without a background in ancient Judaism. If you don't want to say that that's modern Judaism or rabbinic Judaism, then that's fine, I guess, although they both derive from the same source, going back to the Old Testament. So I understand what you're saying. It's a fair point. But we have to use our terms, and there is a technical sense in which Judeo-Christian makes total sense. I mean, I've always thought it's pretty incredible. In the 40s BC, they had health standards equivalent to the early 1910s. The Roman sanitation, the aqueducts, the bathhouses, the Romans knew how to keep their people healthy and safe. Let me see. Mary was 15, 16, and her marriage wasn't an actual traditional marriage where they were expected to be romantic. It was more like caretaking. That's a common view, especially among Christians who are Catholics who believe Mary was a perpetual virgin. And I don't know. Let me see here. Can we change the topic to Islam? Haven't we talked enough about religion? I've answered questions about Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. No one's asked anything about Hinduism, which I think is sad. Hinduism is quite fascinating. You guys, after this, you can watch my video on the history of Christmas. You can, if you want to learn about Judaism, you can watch my video on Hanukkah. I'm sure a lot of you would love that, especially after all the stuff you said to me earlier about quoting spurious source from the Talmud. All of that. But you could also watch my video on the Varna system and how Hinduism developed in India. Caligula. By the way, I do have videos on the Roman emperors and Roman history. Caligula starts off with a lot of promise. He's very young. People think that he will make things better after Tiberius, but he ends up being even worse than Tiberius. Probably suffered from severe mental issues, at least bipolar. He kills a wide array of his court, turns the Roman palace into a brothel, supposedly allowed his horse to eat with him at state dinners, and may have even made it a senator. It's quite crazy. Interesting. I didn't know that Ganesh references the human brain. Thank you for telling me about that. Eventually, Caligula is killed by the Praetorian Guards, and his uncle Claudius is made emperor, and he's far more stable. How did all the Hindus get in charge of so many hotels in California? Migration, I would assume. Did you know Hindus also were killed and oppressed by Muslims? Just drop it, man. Just celebrate Christmas, peace, and goodwill to all. You don't need to bash Islam all the time. Yes, Caligula went to war on the sea because he believed he was Zeus and he was going to war with Poseidon. Christianity and Paul specifically promotes the idea of a woman needing to be past the flower of her age. That's after. Yes, that's true, but that still could be relatively young. He's oodles of fun. He's also supposedly had an incestuous relationship with his sister when she was going to birth Athena, because he's Zeus, who Athena was supposedly going to kill Zeus. He killed her and her child, not Zeus, but Caligula, who killed his sister and her child. Can you do a video on this rise of Sulla, all the way to the rise of Augustus? Oh, that's fun. Oh, so the Optimates Popularis. Sulla was a Roman general who opposed Marius and tried to basically destroy his reputation. It was in the power vacuum that Sulla left that you eventually get the rise of the triumvirate with Caesar, Crassus, and Pompey, and from there you get the Roman Civil War and the rise of the Caesars. I think that is where you get the downfall of the Republic and the rise of the Empire. Very fair. The last century. You also have the Spartacus revolt around the same time. Okay, I will celebrate Christmas, but I couldn't do it if I was still Muslim because it's haram. Okay. Let me see here. Hunger Games used children, which was your opinion. Hunger Games used children, which was no way like Rome, but used criminals and prisoners of war. Sure. That's kind of weird, but okay. Women hundreds or thousands of years ago didn't have OnlyFans or media, but then again, the heart of man is evil. Okay, then. Spartacus is overblown. You're allowed your opinion. By the way, you sound like my mom. She also tells me to stop being obsessed with Islam and religion and all, instead try to be happy. Great. I'm glad I sound like someone's mom. In that very, very seasonal idea of being happy, celebrating everybody, not hating anyone, I think I'm going to wrap it up. Hopefully you don't hate me after today, although some of you might. Hopefully you love history, which is my sign-off, which I hope everybody does. And I hope everybody does indeed have a wonderful Christmas. And I would say Happy New Year, but you'll see me before the New Year. You'll see me on Friday for the usual Q&A at 6 p.m. Eastern for another hour of history and social studies where I answer all of your questions. And I really did love this. I really did enjoy this. I didn't always love it being brought back to geopolitical and religious issues, but I will be back to talk about history, and that's what I want to talk about. That's what I focus about. One thing that is really strange about the Hindu religion is that they burn the dead bodies in public. What's that all about? The sati that the British banned, by the way, basically it's common for ancient religions did this, and the Hindus are an ancient religion. Thank you, Eric. Really appreciate that. A Merry Christmas to you. But yes, the Hindus do it as a form of showing that there's death, but there's also rebirth, and it's part of the incarnation process in Hinduism, Rick. Let me see here. Judeo-Christian values don't exist. We have Christianity because Judaism was corrupted. The Trinity is truth. They're not the chosen ones. So you have taken, by the way, you've gone from, I said there were Judeo-Christian values that inspired the American founding fathers, to you have jumped on that to say that Judaism, to go about the Trinity and to say, I implied the Jews are chosen. I never said anything about the Trinity or the Jews being chosen. People who typically have that view are just gatewaying to all sorts of Christian chauvinism. So, my hate has been founded, and thank you, Bill. It's good that you came back. I was worried you were upset, but thank you for the super chat. Really appreciate you. You asked some of the best questions tonight. You should be the MVP of the group, and I waited long enough, and I got another super chat, so that's really great. But we're coming up on 2 hours and 10 minutes, and in the spirit of giving, I guess I overpoured a little bit. But a very, very happy holidays to all of you. Even if you don't celebrate, relax, enjoy your day off from work. And as I suspected, I was right all along. Take care, love history, and see you on Friday. Bye-bye now.